11. Sending the kids back home. After the honest and heartfelt words of Miruk, Liam stopped what he was doing and met the gaze of a teen, then he looked over the two quizzically, and simply nodded. He understood the general gist of them being grateful to him, which felt nice, not gonna lie, but it was forced upon him. Not helping them was bad for a lot of reasons, and besides this he understood nothing of what they said. It was good, what he feared didn't happen, the boy, in particular, being irrational and blaming him for whatever reason didn't happen, as it would force him to do things he wouldn't like. It was his life here the most important, and if the kid ever so dared to blame him, chances were Liam would have put the kid back in his place. He wasn't going to fold backward and let someone spit at him for no reason, the consequence be damned. Liam then pointed a finger at himself and said, presenting himself with a smile, "Liam, my name is Liam. Liam Cram. Learham. Learham Crham, the name of our Savior. I'm Tuti Te Tusnaiten, and this is my dearest friend Miruk Teraka." Tuti repeated his name excitedly, then pointed at her and the other teen. All the fear from yesterday was gone to the excited teenager. Liam was far less scary without that bizarre headpiece, and also not looking like a wild animal ready to tear you apart. It was a strange name, but what does she know about Sky people's culture? From what she could see, this Sky person and his home was already totally different than what she ever saw. In the first place, the concept of a stationary home was entirely foreign to her, but that is what makes it so fascinating. Why would Liam Cram limit himself to one place? Liam proceeded to correct her pronunciation of his name until she roughly got it right, and he also did the same for both of their names until he got it right. He was trying to learn their language, it was a must. This was what happened while he cooked. He talked to the teenagers, asking for the names of various objects and actions via mimic. It was a moment of sharing between two entirely different yet similar species in many aspects. It was pleasant in a way to be able to communicate with others, even with the language barrier, and not humans. They were sapiens just like humans, they were people, even if there was an undeniable indestructible barrier due to them being of different species. It was weird for Liam. Never would he have thought 2 months ago he would speak to aliens, and himself be the alien of the situation. It also made him remember he was far from home, as an alien in another universe, and that he lost everything, but he shoved those depressing thoughts aside. The moment the food was ready and served, Liam had the bigger portion. The Nasiks were even more grateful to their savior, and the food was delicious, one of the best meals they ever ate. Something made with ingredients they usually consume but prepared in an entirely new and unique way. It made Miruk temporarily forget about his crippled hand. Sadly, it was only temporary. Speaking of hands, the two ate with their bare hands, and when they saw Liam eat with these strange multi-pointy-ended wood objects, they realized he had given them one such thing for that purpose. Though it was a bit too small for them to use, and using this new alien utensil was impractical at first. But even then it was instantly cleaner and easier to eat the soft and succulent meat with the melting alien potatoes than making mushy and messy with their hand. Liam finished first and as always never stayed idle. He rapidly looked over his egg hidden in the tree to see if it was fine, then burrow a plain slightly damaged two-wheeled wood cart half full of dried grass put in a way to something akin to a mattress big enough for a Nasiks to fit inside. As to why he made a wood cart when he had an inventory. Simple, to carry more things, and it was easy for him to drag with his strength even if it was full. Though it's limited because it needs a pre-designed and predetermined path, otherwise it became obsolete. Finishing his plate, Miruk really started to feel the pain of his injuries. The mixture that Tuti had given to him was wearing off, mostly purged by his body. Noticing this, she took the leftover from the mortar and gave it to him, put a bit of water from a jar, and gave it to him, alleviating the teen's pain. The three suns shone down on the base, and Liam's face suddenly hardened. It was their time to go, doing various gestures and even drawing stick men on a piece of slate with a natural piece of chalk he collected from the coast. The message got across and they understood. They needed to get back to their clan fast, and not abuse their host and savior's generosity. They must be worried sick looking for them. And they will be punished by the Oloikton for their foolishness. Liam was also on the same line of thought. All other possibilities of why they were running away from viper wolves in the middle of the night with no weapons. And how both acted didn't hint at anything but them being teens having done dumb shit such as going out in the middle of the night in a plane full of dangerous beasts that won't refuse 2 free blue snacks, and it's what would have happened if he didn't intervene. Dumb shit with consequences, which angered him to no end, but he kept it inside and didn't lash out. If he learned the reason why they were in this situation he wouldn't have either. He was better than that. That wasn't the intention of the teens to cause him problems, it was he who decided to help them after all, and it gave him a good head start in his relationship with the local native if all things went right. But being forced into a situation by the consequence of stupid action done by other people completely unrelated to you in any way, shape or form was quite high on the list of things that pissed him off royally. He just was good at hiding it, even if his implant constantly glowed slightly brighter than usual. Liam put on his light bronze and leather armor, without a helmet, having learned that it scares them quite a bit, not like it would stop an arrow as long as he was tall, and equipped a small wrist crossbow on his left wrist. Nothing powerful and mostly a prototype with barely 5 meters, 23 feet, of effective range and a wood magazine above consisting of 15 small wood bolts freshly coated in a temporary paralyzing mixture from the venomous gland found in the tails of stingbats. Nothing deadly. It was far from being the most effective or powerful of ranged weapons. That much was obvious, but it worked and was quite unremarkable with just enough power to kill most things around his size and weight if hit a vital area unsurprisingly enough. And speaking of effectiveness, he took a war scythe out of his inventory, not the one that is used by the Grim Reaper of course, as that was a silly and ineffective weapon with the only purpose of earning oneself a swift death in any real-life battle. So in a way it indeed brings death. The war scythe's pole was made out of charcoal black wood where Lien carved various animals from Earth's past and present and some of Pandora. At the end of the pole was a sort of bludgeon made of bronze. And the blade, it wasn't per se a blade forged from any metal, it was one of the great Ostropede's claws, extremely sharp and hard, capable of cutting through a heavy layer of bronze plating with ease, for him that is. And what a scary thought it was. The weapon for him was no heavier than a butter knife is to a regular man. Enhanced strength was terrifying, even more with weapons. He named it Cleaver, for one simple reason. He was bad at naming things and it cleaved through flesh and carbon-reinforced bones powered by his strength with barely any resistance. Not like a normal bronze spearhead didn't either, but it had a high chance to break or chip, and it was not as strong in that aspect either. Bronze was good, excellent even in many scenarios, and had various advantages over steel but not in the weaponry department, and the claw was bona fide biological stainless steel. Anyway, Liam walked up to them fully equipped with the cart at the front for the struggling teens. T helped Miruk onto the cart even if it evidently displeased the teen. He even tried to play it as if his injuries were nothing and he could walk just fine, but he was shut down and put back into the cart by the worried and angry girl. Technically he could walk if he ignored the pain for at least several, and also most of the injuries he had would reopen and which could lead to infections that could also lead to the loss of his legs or worse. Either way, it was a stupid idea. The 3, or more like 2 with a dead weight, moved out of the base, Liam closing the heavy door behind, passing by 2 piles of unrecognizable bones. The corpse of the viper wolves, or what little remained of them. The wooden will crushed them as they advanced, the direction being pointed to Liam by a fidgeting Tuti whose mind was more preoccupied with her teacher would shout at her and as such didn't pay a lot of attention to what the weapon Liam had outside of the strange weapon being incredibly beautiful. Pretty much unaware of her surroundings, which caused Liam to wonder how she survived till then. It was silent outside of the sound of the wind and alien cicada. Now that she walked, Liam could but notice that the native was freaking tall. She was at least a head and a half taller and the adult Nausicaa should tower over her. Surprise, surprise. I was right, Liam thought as the direction was the same as he predicted, not that any Tom, Harry, or Dick couldn't have deduced this. They continued to follow the path for a good hour, not encountering anything worthwhile, no suicidal stingbats, only 2 Chromcyceros, 4-legged birds. They were next to a small bush that as soon as they saw them they ran as far and fast their biology possibly let them do. An hour later Liam suddenly stopped pushing the cart and frowned at 3 shapes in the far distance rapidly approaching their position. 6-legged horse with 3 blue people. 1 on each. Nausicaa. A rescue team? Probably, Liam remarked, mind going over multiple scenarios and how he will act and react in accordance. Pointing in the direction of what he saw, he grunted quite loudly and made known what was approaching to the two brooding teens next to him, who instantly perked up. Miruk spoke, and from the tone, it was the voice of someone who was praying for their father not to beat the shit out of them after having caused a car crash with the sole family car while drunk, underage, and without anyone's permission. As the rescue team of Na-6 slowly approached them, Liam studied while tensing up instinctively, and the air became heavy. He was ready to attack, defend himself, and run at any given moment. All were male and riding dire horses. The one at the back was an old Na-6 but without any apparent wrinkle, a dagger strapped to his torso, and at his right was a young man with a spear and the same dagger as the elder. Finally in the middle was a middle-aged Na-6, he was visibly the leader, wearing a left shoulder pad with intricate but barely noticeable jewelry and a long bone piercing horizontally through the middle of his cat-like nose. All looked at Liam, then at Tuti, and then at the bandaged Na-6 in the strange wood contraception, a Na-6 they were looking for. Various emotions were on their faces. From confusion, anger, sadness, worry, and even hate. The older male talked to Akwi, the leader, both of whom had never seen a sky person, but both were smart and experienced enough to not act rashly, as from what little information they had they instantly understood the grand line of the situation. This man, this sky person, a creature they never saw, was wearing garments reminiscent of the fierce warrior of the Tipani clan but of an unknown material, a weapon on his back of the like he never saw, the blade like to the deadly claws of a Tsaltsping, great ostropede. Creatures feared but also greatly respected, it was known for some time that one recently perished, and for him, the human must have found the body and made a weapon out of one of the claws. Just as he would have, however, there was no envy or jealousy in his heart. It was the All-Mother's will. This man before them wasn't an enemy, he wasn't the same as the demons depicted by the words of the mouth. He wasn't their enemy, neither of his clan nor the people. Akwi could see that much through those lonely and wary alien gray eyes. There wasn't any malice toward them, just wariness as it should be. It was strange that this sky person was alone, however, but what does he know? The man wasn't looking for conflict, he was here to let the children he saved be back to their families. Any other possibilities were fallacies in the Oloikton's mind. Son. How foolish of you, Akwi thought, saddened and disappointed while his gaze fell upon his injured son, clearly wounded from an animal. His heart sank at the sight of the crippled hand. At least he was alive. Then all of a sudden the hot-blooded young hunter next to him, unable to contain himself, roared with clear disgust and hate oozing at the human demon. 12. Gladius. Before anyone could process what was said and do anything, Swarin on his mount was already on his way, cutting the distance between him and Liam in the blink of an eye. The Na-6 wanted to kill the human who in his mind mutilated and kidnapped members of his clan. He was going to free the poor traumatized teenager from this monster. Fuck, Liam internally swore in frustration, a part of his mind telling him, I told you. Grabbing the handle of his war scythe he moved away from the cart, as the madman apparently gave no attention to the wounded inside, which only furthered the human frustration. The muscular six-legged horse, with on top a nearly 3 meters tall blue man wielding a spear that might as well be a jousting spear to a human, was intimidating, but Liam was deathly calm, confident even, but a part of him was still nervous. He was faster, stronger, smarter, and had better weapons than the Na-6 charging at him. This compensated for his non-existent experience in an actual fight against an admittedly experienced cavalier while he was on foot, or in any death fight with a fellow sapient being at all for that matter. Liam didn't have the time to think of an elaborate and peaceful way to solve this problem, and the Na-6 would neither understand nor have listened to him if they could communicate. His gray eyes followed the sharpened stone serving as a spearhead aimed right at his armored chest. With this force and momentum, it would skewer him or at the very minimum break a bit more than some of his ribs. His bronze chest plate wasn't magical. Both of those were unacceptable outcomes. But he didn't move, shocking and horrifying nearly everyone but the Oloikton, who, even if beyond enraged at his hunter and his inability to stop anything, thought this comparatively small sky person had balls of steel in the Na-6 equivalent, or was plain insane, likely both. Even he wouldn't stay rooted on the ground with such confidence, borderline arrogance, if he were in this situation. Though a great part of him was also appealed by the potential death of the man, his voice was loud as he yelled out, but his orders went unheard and it was too late to stop what was going to happen. While the young hunter sneered victoriously at the demon, petrified, in fear, at his might, too clouded by anger to perceive anything more, Liam without wavering swung his war scythe to the side, a simple movement with a clear lack of mastery but with strength beyond what a creature his size behind it should naturally have. The two forces collided, and the blunt side of the curved blade slammed against the pole of the Nasik's weapon, nearly crushing the young hunter's hand, missing the thumb by a few centimeters. Liam felt the shock transfer from the pole of his weapon to his hand and then his arms, forcing his position to move ever so slightly, but he held easily. It was a wee bit painful. The next instant the primitive weapon of the Nasiks broke in half. The butt of the spear whipped against Swarin's back with a loud crack, causing the Tsahelu with his mount to be forcefully and violently severed. This resulted in the young hunter falling from his mount, who immediately neighed and escaped, while for Liam the spearhead aimed for his heart saw nearly all its momentum cut short and it was harmlessly flung into the distance. Before the Nasik's brain registered anything with the shock caused by his mental link brutally severed, Liam aimed his left wrist at the future position of the falling young hunter's shoulder. And with a flex of his pinky finger, a barely audible click was heard and the string of the wrist crossbow propelled a small wooden bolt. The next instant the Nasik slammed on the ground and painfully gurgled out incoherently, Deme-urg. Uref. Swarin's head was spinning, a stinging sensation on his left shoulder as he, unable to catch his breath, lay in shock on his chest. Then all of the pain racking his body slowly and unnaturally started to fade away into nothingness just as his entire left side was getting numb until he couldn't move or feel anything on that side. And it was spreading. Panic was rising, but he couldn't scream for help or run, he was physically unable to, and as such, it created a vicious cycle. The Nasik's green eyes frantically looked everywhere for a way out until they locked onto the gray one of the demon. Terrified as you should, the man thought, his gaze filled with a quality it never had before. It was cold and simmering with anger. This was a new experience. One experience he didn't like, but one he was sure was only going to be the first of so many more. The eyes of the downed Nasiks when he met Liam Owen were not of hate or some self-righteous bravado but of terror as he realized that he was at the demon's mercy. Fear of death, fear of Liam. This time it didn't bother the man. In fact, a part of him strongly wanted to kill the Nasiks right here, right there, and right now, but he won't, he can't. To his great displeasure, a thought that would have horrified him if the situation was different. Doing so will lead to catastrophic consequences for everyone, taking out any possible degree of control of the situation. The current situation was already bad enough as it is. Lucky you, your clan mates are here. If we have the pleasure to meet again I will kill you, Liam whispered with an almost animalistic growl to the Nasiks, whose eyes turned to pinprick out of instinctual terror only a prey would have when faced with its natural predator. The implant glowed brighter but was unnoticed as it was hidden by layers of tissues and armor. Then he took the small wood crossbow bolt out, it was still in one piece, and cleaned the wound with a piece of tissue and saline solution in his satchel. Again, no need for any of these blue people to know about his inventory. Standing up, Liam turned around, smiling at the teens, then his face became unreadable as he observed the two other riders, searching for any sign of aggression. The two faces showed several degrees of shock and shame at what just happened, but neither drew their weapons, which was a very good sign, but ultimately it was their failure to not handle their people adequately, not once but twice. And it will happen again. It was inevitable, likely not from them, but problems like that were but a taste of what was to come. Of course, most Nasiks will be hostile toward him, he was human. With the horrors a good portion of what his species down on this moon had done to the native, but he didn't come here because he wanted. He didn't do anything to warrant such plain aggression and attack on his life. It was unfair, but it was life. Crying wasn't going to solve anything. However, having to take the brunt of consequences from others' actions was getting annoying incredibly fast. And speaking of humans, he was conflicted on how he should act when he was found by them or he found them. But it was a question for later. If it were someone else, that poor soul who only wanted to help would have been killed by a xenophobic maniac with a hate boner for humans. Both species indeed shared many similarities. Let's say that he didn't have the best impression of the Nausicaa, the one who failed to kill him in particular. Teenagers and children could and should be forgiven as long as the mistakes were in the realm of the reasonable, but for adults, it was a different and much more complicated story. That's how Liam saw it. Finally, he walked away ignoring the voices behind him. He was not in the state of mind to stay 1 second more with any of them. But it wasn't bad. He decided to see the glass half filled. He showed himself as someone willing to help, but also as someone that was far from defenseless, will not hesitate to fight back, and is capable of showing mercy and restraint. It wasn't the peaceful ending he had hoped for, but it could have ended oh so much worse. 3 days later. Still no other blue cat people in sight today. That's good, I guess. I can work in peace. Liam thought, audibly cracking his neck from left to right before sighing. He was working on the head of a pickaxe. He was using the steel from one of the claws mixed with a bit of iron, and an even smaller amount of copper. A loss of a claw maybe, but it wasn't adapted to be used as the head of a pickaxe. He was hammering with force and precision while the steel was red hot against a bronze anvil until the shape he desired was attained. Forging was relaxing, just like cooking, and seeing your work take shape before your very eyes was even more satisfying, and gratifying even. Each clank of metal against metal as he worked like a human forge hammer given form was like music, letting him think of something outside of his situations and the future. Finishing after cooling the metal in a big container of water, he verified that there wasn't any crack or problem all over the pickaxe's head, doing various tests at the same time. Nodding to himself in satisfaction, he put the handle, a good hit with the palm of his hand to put the head and the handle together. Spinning the pickaxe like it was but a pen someone would flick around to test if it stayed in place for a short time. And also because it was kinda fun. And a bit dangerous, but that was a minor detail in the grand scheme of things. After he cleaned and stored everything in its designated place, a minimum of order was necessary. Humans were chaotic creatures that thrived in order, and he was no exception to this rule. Taking a cold shower that washed away the grime from the last few days, he put on only a clean pair of plain plant fiber woven pants and walked to the egg, freezing momentarily as he heard a soft crack. A large grin immediately found its way onto his face. He pushed the protective cover of ropes and hides aside, and his grin grew wider like an excited child about to open his Christmas present as cracks were appearing on one side of the egg. Yes. I did it. Ah. Calm down, Liam. It isn't born just yet, he mentally cheered before calming down, but trepidation and excitement were still in his heart. The intense but pleasant glow of his implant also betrayed his current state of mind. Whistling softly, Liam didn't have to wait long for the chick inside to excitedly call back to him. The encouragement of its father spurred it to put more effort into escaping its calcium prison. This exchange continued for at least half an hour until an orange beak followed by a small navy blue roundish head with orange stripes. For round eyes observed their blurry but slowly clearing surroundings for the first time, desperately searching for its father. "Hey, behind you, lil buddy," a gentle but deep voice called from behind. This instantly calmed down the hatchling, who happily chirped, but it was still confused as to where its father was. The voice was familiar, reassuring, and comforting. It recognized it. Looking for the source, it forced its small neck out. Next was the end of its two prehensile neural cues that were attached at the start of said neck. With one final push, it broke free, covered in whatever was supposed to be in an alien egg. It clumsily tried to walk. Turning around, it was met with Liam, whose smile only widened. Immediately abandoning walking, it crawled enthusiastically toward the human, using its arms, which were at moment entirely clawless. Liam with rapt attention observed the newborn murder bird clumsily approach him, and when he saw it was starting to get exhausted, he entered the hole in the tree. Hole that was several meters above the ground. Putting his back against the dry sapwood, he delicately picked up the newborn. It was the size of a turkey, but it was so weak, so fragile. And it was starting to shiver. It needed heat. Placing it in his lap, he took a piece of plant-woven tissue and started cleaning the hatchling, who stopped shivering thanks to the warmth of his body. It stared up at him with unblinking curious eyes, a gaze entirely different from its true parent. It was how a puppy will look at his owner, but more intense. It was hard to describe. The main aspect behind it was love, trust, and attachment. I need to think of a name for you. How about Gladius? Do you like it? Liam asked, looking down at the alien bird who didn't understand anything but chirped happily anyway. Gladius it is then. Not very original, but heh, the human said, and got another chirp for an answer, this one with evident fatigue. It used a lot of energy to hatch after all. He didn't know what sex the bird was it male-female, hermaphrodite, or something else? He didn't particularly care for either of them at the moment. Not like Gladius would get offended if he misgendered it. It huddled even closer to Liam, the small vestigial wings folded on its back, then one of its neural cues as if it had a mind of its own snaked toward Liam's left wrist, who was looking at the scene with great curiosity, unsure of what he should do. Pink tendrils waving in the air covered in short pure white follicles emerged as the skin protecting them unfurled in a similar way to a flower blooming, and then they touched the cold metal of his implant. My Patreon if you want to give me money and have chapters 1 have finished in advance. Patreon.com/user?u=60424165. 13. First Tame. Liam did have a sense of touch on his implant. It was comparable to a nail but muted and different in a way clearly not organic. It was unique and perturbing at first, but he got used to it rapidly. It was an integral part of his body, where most of his consciousness resided. If it were to be greatly damaged he would likely fall unconscious for an undetermined period of time until its self-repair, or if the damage were too severe it will outright kill him. Though damaging it in any meaningful way was far easier said than done. Tech problems needed tech solutions, or a lot of explosions, or a lot of raw kinetic energy, or being thrown into the sun. So Liam, even knowing it could be a potentially dangerous decision, decided to take the risk and let it happen. He observed as the tendrils of the hatchling neural cue touched his implant. At first, it tickled, then he felt a barely noticeable prickling sensation as they spread like roots and arrived at the frontier between his skin and metal. His pupils suddenly dilated to their utmost limit as an alien, bordering on the disturbing sensation, washed over the very edge of what he supposed was his mind or something close to that. He will go with mind for the moment. The first time he was aware of his mind, the deepest part of his being. It was strange, neither particularly painful nor particularly pleasant. It was a new sensation altogether. The implant and the hologram above it brightened, and pre-programmed protocols were launched to protect the engram matrix of Liam from any potential corruption or damage. As one might suggest, it wasn't designed for this intended purpose, but it was not rigid. Then Liam felt a connection, a mental one. The hatchling jerked slightly before looking up at him. He felt curiosity, intense raw happiness, and a deep sense of trust, a feeling of safety with him and of storage. But all distinctively inhuman in nature. It was surreal, unnatural to his mind and perception of emotions, but this feeling vanished as soon as it came. Those weren't his emotions, those were from Gladius in his lap, they were easily sorted from his own after this. To never be mixed again. He could read them, but it was only the surface, or more like there wasn't much more than that at the moment. It was not even 2 hours old. Through this link, Liam thought of it like sending a message on his phone, but here he was the phone. He tried and succeeded to send vague messages that told the hatchling it was safe, that he was joyful about its health and proud it hatched safely. Gladius responded by doing repeated short low chirping, almost like the purr of a cat, and the wave of childlike happiness only intensified through the link, which earned a chuckle from Liam. The implant suddenly flickered, Gladius froze before chirping joyfully, and Liam instantly understood what just happened. The hatchling fully submitted to him of its own volition. The implant acted on what it was designed for, even if the situation was new, binding Gladius to him by means Liam wasn't fully aware of and a part of the implant he truly wanted to learn more about. So much potential. So that's how I do it. But it is far from easy, many conditions are necessary. Condition only a controlled environment can give, he remarked, very pleased with this discovery. It opened many possibilities. Liam tamed it, only its death will separate it from him, or if he decided to sever its connection with the implant, which would not end well for the great ostropede. However, it was vastly different than in the game, but with some common points. In the first place, just like various species of birds on Earth, Gladius had fully imprinted on Liam, even before it hatched. It was one of the man's objectives, raising an alien murder chicken only for it to turn on you and rip you to fleshy ribbons was less than an ideal end, all things considered. The nature of those differences will need testing, but not now. Liam could feel the fatigue of the hatchling, and it will need to grow first too. Being hasty could lead to premature death. Newborns are fragile and need care. Incredible, Liam thought. It was fascinating to see it slowly fall asleep, how the mind became less and less active until it became nearly silent. It was as if a tumultuous sea calmed until small waves remained. Soon after, the tendrils moved back into their protective flap of skin at the end of the neural queue, and this strange link was interrupted, but in its place a link of a slightly different nature that went unnoticed until now made itself known. He could barely feel any of the alien emotions now, which made him breathe a sigh of relief he didn't know he held until now. It was a fantastic experience, but one that made his instincts scream in discomfort. After all, a human wasn't a Na-6, there were many similarities. That was a fact. As strange as it was, but some biological barriers simply cannot be crossed. However, other alternative paths can be found, just like what happened. Closing his eyes, Liam was aware of the general location of Gladius with the implant. He had feedback through the link on its general states, from which he supposed was from the hatchling nervous system. Then the most important part, he felt a degree of control he didn't know the extent of over Gladius. But there was a distinct feeling of familiarity, as always. Even then it felt extremely odd to have all of these new senses. Some he was sure weren't in the implant's original design, and most the fault of this moon's unique wildlife biology. With those thoughts, he soon followed and fell asleep, but still ready to jump at any moment. Early in the morning, he was awakened by a chirp, and groaning. He groggily opened his eyes, and right in his face was the double-ended tail of Gladius. Moving it aside, he stretched, cracking most of the articulation of his body at the same time attracting the attention of the bird. "Buddy, you're hungry, right?" Liam cooed as he felt the hunger of Gladius while he scratched its head, making it chirp, purred and flare its wings in excitement. Picking the hatchling up securely in his arms, Liam jumped straight down, landing softly on the ground. As he did so, a chirp was heard. He placed Gladius on the ground and it clumsily stood up, before it walked around, falling beak first 2 times before succeeding. Then it waddled behind like a duckling following its mother, a murder duckling, but a duckling nonetheless. From Liam's understanding, Gladius species was mostly frugivore, but that was from his understanding and not the absolute truth. That's why he was going to see what Gladius would eat. Better be safe than sorry. And so the following hour passed with Liam finding what Gladius ate, to finally end with a mixture of strange-looking fruits seasoned with iron powder. He fed this to the hatchling until it fell asleep. At the same time, far away in the Great Plain, under a wide and tall teepee built of hides from various animals held together by branches and bones, a symbol in the shape of a dire horse head seen from the side was painted on a wood sign. The scent of incense was thick in the air. Various candles were made of hellfire wasp's wax. Inside, a young Na-6 lying on a bed of grass. It was Miruk, sweat covering his body, a strained expression of pain on his face. Above him, an extremely aged female Na-6 covered in various tribal jewelry, one of such representing her status as the Tsahik of the Olangi clan on her forehead. She also wore around her neck a knife with the blade made of the first dire horse she bonded with. Her skin was also scarred, each telling a story. She was slowly chanting prayer while scrutinizing the wounds with a sharp analytical gaze, and acted with experience and precision faster than her appearance might suggest. Next to her tuti, the Tsakurem, the sole student of the older Na-6, was preparing medicinal paste not dissimilar to what she did at Liam's base but with more ingredients. "I see you," Tuti said, voice filled with sadness, regret, and guilt to Miruk, her lips pursed, ears flattened. "I see you," the wounded teen responded in kind, and with a weak smile, before she gave him what she just finished concocting. The effect, just as in the sky person's demur, was nigh instant, and Miruk rapidly fell into a deep sleep. Sighing, Tuti looked up and was met with the severe gaze of her teacher. Words went unsaid, but the teen knew how disappointed her teacher was in her recent actions, and justly so. The Tsahik was not at the camp when the 2 teens decided to go out in the middle of the night. At that moment she was coming back from her yearly spiritual voyage to the Utroyak Sea, the Tree of Divergence from the deep below of Iwa. The Tree of Voices was where all the clans found in the Great Plains communicated with Iwa and their ancestors. the most sacred and important place for the horse clans of the Great Plains. When she learned of what her great-granddaughter and the youngest son of the Oloikton did, the damage it caused, and the consequences on both of the young Nausicaa, she was less than pleased. Furious beyond what she has been for the last 90 Earth years even, but she didn't show it. Keeping a calm exterior was a must for her role in the clan. "Marali, how is my son?" The voice of a male was heard, worried but strong. Recognizing him, that Sahik turned from the sleeping teen where her gaze had softened to Akwi where it became grave. "He is fine, a strong but foolish young man he is. He will heal, that I'm sure of, and soon be able to walk as fine as he had before. However, his left hand." And if the lost child didn't intervene, that Sahik didn't finish, seeing Akwi tense up at the mention of his son's hand and the sky person. The lost child was what Marali called the sky person or Liam Cram. She didn't explain why she called him that, even when asked. Confusing greatly the ones in the known about the human, but there must be a reason. When she climbed back from the sacred hollow, the location that gave the safest path to the Utral Yak Sea, she was utterly silent and stayed this way until she arrived at the temporary encampment of the clan. Something that rarely if ever happened. Then she and the Oloikton discussed the recent events, and what should be planned for the future. One that seemed to be far from easy or simple. Their migration was already delayed by a few days, Miruk injuries being the reason. A fact understood by all. A selfish choice from the Oloikton puts the clan at risk, in particular, because of the Rethys, stingbats, Europe, storm, at night during that time of the year. What of the young hunter who tempted to murder the lost child? That Sahik asked with a frown, a movement of her hand, and her student understood she needed to leave. Even if incredibly curious, she did so without rebuttal. Tuti knew better than to anger her great-grandmother further. That Sahik's opinion of the human was fundamentally different from anyone else who knew about his existence. Her deep connection with the All-Mother was one of her greatest pride. The aspect every Sahiks thrived for in their entire lives, but her last connection to the Tree of Divergence was the most intense of all. She passed out and nearly died. It was the first time she heard Iwa with such clarity. A voice a mere elderly Nausicaa like her cannot comprehend the grandeur that is the billion-years-old consciousness of a planetary all-encompassing superorganism that was their all-mother and goddess, Iwa. Through this short but intense discussion, that Sahik interpreted fragmented pieces of memories from both fauna and flora, some of sights, smells, fears, pains, touches, hungers, life, death, and so much more that couldn't be described by words. All were related in some shape or form to the sky person Liam. And even if it were but glimpses, broken and for most difficult if impossible to comprehend, she knew that this being was more. The All-Mother was observing him. She was curious. He could defeat with only his wits and body a creature that would need the collective effort of an entire clan to kill. But he was lost, alone, learning, growing, improving, far from his species, and as such a lost child thereby the way she called him. And he wasn't an enemy of the people. He saved 2 of the Olangi from certain death and did beyond by sheltering, healing, and feeding them before guiding them back to their loved ones. Risking his own life. Sworeen Teaifut will be exiled from the clan. Only your words can change his fate, the Oloikton said somberly, be it a Nausicaa or a human attempt at the life of one's own savior, be it oneself or of a member of the same clan. It was one of the worst crimes one can commit, even if born out of misinterpretation. Actions always had consequences. Then let it be so. His life and future will be for the All-Mother to decide, and no more for the Olangi to cater to. Actions have consequences, she said with firmness, but sadness was in her aged voice. It was a death sentence, but the rules of the ancestor must be followed. It was thanks to them they survived till now and for the future. However, both knew it was going to steer unease, particularly for the closest to the future exiled hunter, but what must be done must be done. My Patreon if you want to give me money and have chapters 1 have finished in advance. Patreon.com/user?u$60424165. 14. Pandora's Moody Weather. 2 days later. Liam stared at the waist-height hatchling who just woke from its sleep after eating at least 2 kilos worth of food, and it stared back at him curiously. Gladius pecked not so gently at the feet of the workshop where Liam was working until this exact moment when he was rudely interrupted by the bird. He was working on a minor part of a fabricator that would help for the overall stability, while the term fabricator might be inappropriate considering the one he was building was incomparable to its 21st century counterpart. Evidently, the one from the game wasn't the same as the one translated into reality, but it was still vastly more advanced, versatile, and adaptable than the 21st century one. The only real point in common was the name and their general purpose of making stuff. The problem however was that at the moment he could but do an extremely bastardized version of it. One that was needed to do the real deal, however. Tools needed to make tools themselves needed to make tools. And he lacked resources, notably a lack of silver, diamond, lithium, iron, and more, and in tools too, particularly of high precision as they are needed to produce highly processed material and components. Not forgetting that he also lacked fuel adapted for it. He had a small stock of coke, not the drink, he made that out of charcoal, itself made of heated carbon-reinforced bones and woods, by heating it extremely hot for long periods to get something as close to pure carbon as possible. In other words, thermal distillation, but coke was only for forging steel as it burned extremely high. He needed something like petroleum here. And it will need to be refined too. Something he lacked. He lacked many resources, which was also why he was working on going into the giant grotto and hopefully finding some of what he was looking for. Hey buddy, it isn't food you know. Stop, Liam said amusedly to Gladius, who instantly stopped moving. Storing the metallic contraption otherwise known to him as the piece A068B will go above A070C and at the left by 70 degrees up of A069B. He hummed pensively at various names of the piece and the many more that needed to be made before concentrating on the link between him and the alien baby murder chicken. Sit, he sentimentally commanded. It was more of a feeling mixed with intention than coherent words or sentences, just like he did unconsciously before when speaking. Though doing it consciously seemed not particularly harder, but it was just strange. It was like a new metaphorical muscle that was used for the first time. Gladius did just that and sat while observing him with its 4 big round eyes. In his left hand, a palm-sized fruit appeared. It was black with some blue hue, nothing exceptional about it if not its shape being a strange but homogeneous mix between a pineapple, a banana, and a lemon. And it tasted like pure and high-quality apple juice. Gladius caught the fruit thrown into its beak, it crushed then swallowed the to messily eat whatever mess the hatchling let fall to the ground before looking up at Liam patiently waiting for more food. Liam continued to give the same type of fruit until Gladius stopped asking. A session of head scratch on the ladder and Liam was testing what he could make his not-so-feathery buddy do. It was a hatchling, not even half a week old at that, and it was visibly bigger than when it hatched, not much but that's that. Still, it was a baby, which means nothing extraordinary will come out after such a short time. Well, in Liam's perspective that is. Gladius was extremely obedient to him, with the capacity to communicate with it even if it was by unusual means being key to it, as the hatchling had a rough understanding of what father wanted. The hatchling was smart, smarter than one might expect, but it could only understand very simple commands such as, sit, stand up, stop, and follow me. All things considered, it was beyond exceptional what just happened, all of it done in a mere hour, which would at a minimum take days if not weeks, and this to near perfection. And it was but the start. Though more complicated command will entirely depend on how smart Gladius species can actually get. From his observation he would guess around that of a crow. He wasn't an ethologist, even less a xenoethologist. Something can be absolutely obedient and do what it's asked with all its heart and soul, but if it can't understand what it was asked to do, to begin with, it won't go far. There was enormous potential, and Liam was sure his choice of not making an omelette out of Gladius was the right one. With this, he also got information on how to tame other animals, the part where he took care of the egg and made the chick imprint on him being the most important part to him. Building trust and a bond was key. Trust, unfathomable and absolute trust were close to that, something that was impossible to get unless in very special circumstances. At least that's what Liam presumed, and frankly trying to play with his mind on something he didn't trust himself and adding that the creatures would be 99% of the time plainly aggressive to him didn't seem to be the best of ideas. Thought the possibility of forcing the taming process was here, but with the wildlife general behaviors around him and the condition of the creatures needing to fully submit to him, it seemed very unlikely to work. Feeding the exhausted hatchling until it fell asleep again, Liam continued to work until the last of the 3 suns disappeared from the sky of Pandora and he stopped working. The irregularity of the day and night cycle was quite annoying, as it could screw him if he wasn't careful, not forgetting the occasional eclipse, be it total, partial, hybrid, or annual, and likely a dozen more, as there were more celestials' bodies to be taken into account than the good old Earth, Moon, and Sun. He ate, as per usual, at least 1 kilo of meat. This time it was from the hexapede, and he also made salted French fries out of a potato-like plant that he cut and then fried in animal fat. His diet was less than healthy, constituted of protein with protein and supplement of fat. Dangerous to even suicidal for a normal man, but he was far from being normal. The fact he ate so much was and still is strange to him. Though it makes sense considering how absurdly strong and active he was. Anyway, he slept near the base of the tree in one of the carved areas. Gladius was peacefully snoozing next to him, head on his lap, and splayed in such a way that made one think as if bones were a foreign concept to its body. The hatching was like a dog, a puppy, a strange thought for an animal that will rival a giraffe in size and puts to shame a swan and a cassowary combined in sheer aggressiveness for anything it doesn't like. High-pitched squeaks echoed in the great plain. At first it was more than a dozen, but it soon demultiplied, and the sound of wings beating the air rich in xenon became louder and louder, almost to the point of being deafening. In the middle of the night, Liam, as the light sleeper he is, just got his sleep cut short by a cacophony of screech resonating. It was irritating to one's ears, like chalk scraping on a blackboard. The strange dream he just had, where he walked on a dead and corrupted planet, was rapidly vanishing from his mind as he pushed the sheet aside to look outside. His eyes gained instant clarity at the sight. Dark clouds covered the sky, and below was wave upon wave of stingbats flying like an unending tide. The humidity was high, higher than usual, a distinct difference from a few hours ago, and the smell of ozone was thick in the air, his hair instinctively standing up. Liam had a bad feeling about what was going to come if the literal tide of bats wasn't a good enough indicator. All of them were flying out of the ground, specifically from the various caves and grottos that led below the plain. Liam saw one of the bigger swarms of alien bats flies off the closest grotto to him. Then there were lightings of purple and white zipping and crackling through the dark cumulonimbus, their light almost blinding, and the sound of their roaring thunder only delayed by how fast the sound could travel through the air. This was followed by lightning slamming from where the stingbats flew out in swarms, the billion-joule worth of energy transferring from one animal to the other, killing hundreds upon hundreds, but it had barely any effect on their number. Liam's eyes widened in shock as the lighting hit the ground, and half a second later, with half the speed, was sent back with a dulled light at the sky, frying hundreds of bats as it did so too. This cycle continued as electricity rained down to only be sent back, all moving faster than his eyes could perceive. Only the return strokes were visible and wearable as thunders slammed against his eardrums. It looked like a war between the earth and the sky, and how it was naturally possible was extremely fascinating. His mind immediately went to the unique metal he found there. But it wasn't the time for that. Gladius was awakened by it too and cowered behind Liam, while panic was rising in its being. The man, sensing it through the link, frowned. Right, they needed to move, immediately. He didn't want to try and see what getting struck by lightning felt like, and he supposed neither did Gladius, considering it will very likely kill the hatchling. He was surprised when the hatchling made a sudden neural link with him via the connection to his implant from one of its prehensile neural cues. Liam felt a short prickling sensation around the implant, and his gray eyes dilated. The man looked down at his tame, and its emotions, as different as they were from human ones, were crystal clear to him. Gladius was afraid, and he reacted by sending emotions telling the hatchling that it was safe. It had mild results as Liam wasn't certain himself, but Gladius visibly calmed down, and that was good enough. Taking the bird below his left arm, keeping the neural link in the process. Liam picked a cover made of plants with hide sewn together, and he jumped down to the ground. Holding tightly and securely, he landed softly, even if he was pretty heavy after all. A stingbat, closely followed by 4 more, flew low, not seeing the two as food, as they severely lacked in cerebral capacity to arrive at this conclusion. Then they noticed something shining, the anvil, and attacked it with abandon. The only reason this aggressive species, even more so in this biome, with a total lack of self-preservation, were still thriving was their prodigious mating capability, that would rival mice, rapid growth rate mixed with an omnivorous diet from nectar, fruit to nausicaa, and human alike. Though they were at the base of the food chain, even if they were also capable of hunting in a big enough swarm most of Pandora's wildlife, making them a keystone species as seed dispersers, pollinators, prey, and predators. The sound of thunder in the air only amplified, and to Liam's horror, the thunderstorm rapidly gained in power, the wind starting to pick up, nearly blowing the cover he was walking under. Suddenly Liam's hair on his neck stood on end, Gladius' fear rose by several folds. He instinctively crouched, there was a blinding light from his back and crack boom. His ear rang at the sound. The highest branch of the tree was slammed by lightning, however, it didn't break nor took fire. Then Liam gnashed his teeth in pain as a tingling and sharp sensation flowed in the sole of his feet, then his leg until it dissipated around his navel. It was very painful, but incomparable to the great ostripede cry or having his back cut open, temporarily paralyzing him as it caused every muscle on the way to briefly and painfully spasm before regaining his full motor function, and this encouraged him to move faster. Arriving at the trapdoor, he opened the heavy wood panel with his right hand while still holding the plant-sown cover and entered the hole in the ground, the roots of the tree visible inside and glowing, brighter than ever before. Liam realized that the tree had redirected a big portion of the electricity into the soil, a very conductive soil now that he thought about it, or it was the roots or both. It wasn't the time to idle on the unique alien flora biology or soil composition. Fuck, he swore as he closed behind him, and walked farther. The air inside was hot and electric, but it was better than outside in the middle of the highest class of thunderstorms. In front of him, one of the roots glowed brighter. His eyes widened as he thought it was going to explode, but it dimmed, and the next instant he felt a painful shock similar to needles pricking his nerves through his feet. It was the same sensation as outside but less intense. Not even half a second later the muffled sound of thunder echoed. The current was somewhat constant, making it harder to move but far from impossible. It only stopped when he neared the end of the tunnel. Sitting down, back against a wood beam, Liam breathed in and out trying to calm down his sizzling anger. Images of the chaos and damage brought down by the thunderstorm upon his base kept flashing in his mind. While he could stay underground and wait, just like after he killed the great ostripede, the neural link with Gladius curled in a ball shivering was what snapped him back to the present at his hands and let him have a breather. Petting the bird's head with his right hand, sighing, Liam slammed the back of his head against the wood beam and then groaned. Right. It's just material lost at worst, and most of what was truly important is in or durable enough. But ARK. Fuck, it's still my shit, Liam rationalized, but with clear frustration as anyone would have in such a situation. Gazing at the roots in the distance, they slowly dimmed as they discharged most of their energy through their surroundings. At that moment he couldn't help but think that he would need to build an underground base in the future. My Patreon if you want to give me money and have chapters 1 have finished in advance. Patreon.com/user?u=60424165. 15. Unpleasant surprise. Standing with a sleeping Gladius under his left arm, Liam gazed upon the damage of the thunderstorm. Taking a careful step from the stone around the trap door to the muddy ground. His legs still hurt slightly from the electricity that had coursed through them last night. But besides this minor inconvenience, he was uninjured. Same goes for Gladius. It had also rained during the night, a fact that both brought joy and anger, mostly anger. Rain was rare up until now, that much he could tell from how it only rained once 2 weeks ago and it was a mere drizzle. Here it was a downpour. The tunnels were even worse, but the water could go through various holes that went deeper. It was where he got his clay, and the soil down was not as impermeable as the one above, so it was absorbed into the ground, mostly. As such, the water level never surpassed his ankle. But it was still dangerous, and as soon as he remarked what was happening he used his inventory, even though there was the neural link in Gladius under his right arm. Taking pebbles, wood, and other trash from his inventory, he made for the both of them a safe area in the form of a pile that put them above water. He was electrified enough for the night. He didn't sleep and neither did his tame, who only did so when it couldn't hear thunder anymore, which was an hour ago, and just to be sure if the thunderstorm really stopped, Liam waited a bit more until he decided to go out. He counted how long they stayed underground, so he knew it was the day. And that brings us back to the present. It's not as bad as I anticipated. It could have been way worse, Liam mumbled. His voice seemed to wake up Gladius, noticing that Liam placed the hatchling, who chirped and instantly started exploring around, waddling in the mud happily. Puddles, mud, branches, and mutilated corpses of stingbats were strewn everywhere from his base to way beyond it. It was a horrifying and apocalyptic scene, to put it mildly. The number of bats who must have died should easily count in the several thousand, most being gruesome, some to the point of what remained of their body to be spread over several hundred meters. Not that Liam felt any pity for those creatures who, by the way, he hated with a passion, now even more as he would have to clean up. He also hoped that this put a dent in the bats' population. The stench in the air was horrendous, a mix of earthy muddy water, with blood and guts, while amid the source of those smells were small vibrant green dots. Seedlings from hundreds of different species of plants were growing from the catastrophe and the dead. It was poetic in a very morbid way. Nature in all of its beauty. Aside from this, the wall of tree trunks he built was leveled at various points by either the wind, water from the rain, or both. The gateway was damaged but overall in good condition, and his smoking house, where he stocked and preserved most of his meats, fruits, and vegetables, was all but gone with what it contained. As he continued to walk around and take on the damage in more detail, his brow furrowed more and more, and his workbench was broken with the bronze anvil slightly melted to the side. The forge was not doing so well either, but it needed to be remade either way, so it wasn't really a loss. The start of his farm was now more of a small swamp. The little number of plants still alive were stored in his inventory to stop them from drowning any further. The well to the side of the said farm was in good if not excellent condition, as he built it for it to endure, but the piping system connected to it was not so lucky. Clay and ceramic containers were either cracked, broken, or had fallen and spilled their content, mostly food condiments. Only the bigger ones containing salt or other more heavy objects remained in good condition. The various metals he had were stored in wooden boxes such as bronze, copper, tin, steel, gold, iron, and aluminum in descending order of quantities were mostly untouched if slightly melted off for some, but that detail was unimportant. Other boxes filled with soaked coal and coke, only needed to dry, maybe another go under high heat and be usable again. Most of his leather was gone or too damaged to be usable. The structures made to treat them had the same fate as the workbench. It was the same end for various other resources of animal origins that were outside. The remaining claws of the great ostrich were in his inventory. The same goes for the pieces of the fabricator, his armor, tools, and various weapons such as his war scythe cleaver. There was no real limit to the size of what he could carry as long as he waited for it to be stored, only weight was, which was why what he was doing ultimately limited how much he could carry at all times. But only a fool wouldn't carry the most important and necessary object with him at all times with such an option available. And he wasn't in the game. Losing his stuff if he died was quite low on the priority list. Respawning was not possible. There wasn't a certain Homo Deus behind him that will revive him again and again. If he dies, then that's the end. Well, maybe not truly considering his situation, but he wasn't going to test this frivolously suicidal theory. All in all, he didn't know if he should laugh or cry. Most of the work he did during his time on this moon was swept away like it was nothing, as he was forced to stay underground completely powerless. Sadly, frustration here was unneeded, unhelpful, and counterproductive. Though it didn't stop the feeling of the likes to exist, he wasn't an emotionless robot, but this little setback wasn't going to stop him, far from it. The worst was that he thought of the possibility of a sudden natural disaster knocking up at his door. But the only preparation he could do was to have what was important and fragile to him and have a safe area, a shelter, and it's also one of the reasons he dug a hole leading to the outside of the wall. Now, approaching the tree, Liam took in more detail. It was alive. It was damaged certainly, but only some branches. Most of the leaves and flowers were gone, but budding leaves could be seen all around its crown even from down here. Also, the branch where his tree house was simply gone. where he didn't know, probably kilometers away, and he barely slept in it anymore anyway, as Gladius couldn't be taken up there. That didn't mean he was happy about this discovery though. Damn, the tree was hit by lightning at the bare minimum 7 times. How the fuck is it still standing? He thought, completely puzzled and shocked by this. He knew what a tree struck 1 time by lightning on Earth looked like from up close, keywords being on 1 and Earth. It brought a worrying possibility. The tree, particularly the species of which this tree was part of, had adapted to this environment and was the only tall and tallest tree in the Great Plain as far as he could see. It wasn't a coincidence it survived the night, it was adapted to survive this kind of hazard, which means they were common enough for evolution to kick in. I will need to move. But not now, Liam said with a deep frown, mind working on how it will be a headache to move everything, first. I need Gladius to be big enough to move and also find an acceptable area. The following days consisted of firstly cleaning up the carcass of stingbats, Liam taking meat and part of their body that were still usable, as he hated wasting resources, be them of any origin. What couldn't be used was simply burned to ash, ash that had been used. Letting half a ton of stingbats' remains to rot outdoors and on the ground was stupid at best, and at worst could lead to diseases, parasites, and attract unwanted animals, these kinds of things. And the smell. The little flood in his base was short-lived too, the water was absorbed by the dry soil and the new plants growing from it. He fixed his walls in record time, as it was just some trunks that were pulled out, nothing was truly destroyed. He remade most of what was destroyed too, notably his workbench, which he upgraded to help in more meticulous work, and as well as a better, bigger, more resistant forge that could handle higher levels of heat. He worked fast and with terrifying efficiency. Presently, it was the middle of day 69 and Liam was silently creeping between tall blades of grass toward his next meal, his eyes focused on a boar-sized 6-legged creature. It has navy blue leathery skin, 6 stumpy legs ending with 3 clawed and finned paws, 4 nasty-looking fangs out of its big triple-articulated jaws, and finally, 5 pinkish frills flaring outward from its rump like a peacock would. He called it a peacock lystro for the simple reason that the animal's general body shape reminded him of a lystrosaurus, without the cuddly factor and the ability to do backflips on command. It was one of the recent animals that migrated here after the thunderstorm. After this storm things changed. It rained at least 2 times a day in the vast majority of the Great Plain. Liam supposed it was the start of the rainy season or something close to its equivalent. And honestly, while it was good for the biodiversity, it was a new uncontrollable factor that caused problems, as the rain was both a boon and a curse. Mostly a curse when you don't have an effective way to stop water from infiltrating everything. At least the mosquito equivalent of this moon didn't like his blood, which was another story for poor Gladius. The rain modified not only the flora and fauna but also the Great Plain topography. Streams were formed and concluded in rivers, themselves fusing into one bigger. All were shallow, but it was still a drastic change to whatever he saw of those familiar plains. A bronze javelin appeared in his left hand, as Liam took a throwing position, arm straightening, and right as he was going to throw his weapon something happened. Liam paused as the clear water of the stream his prey was drinking from broke, and a squeal of surprise mixed with agony echoed, startling a dozen of 4-winged featherless flamingo-like creatures, tetrapterons, all of who promptly flew away. A fish, at least 3 meters, 9 feet 9, long fish with a body shaped like a torpedo, 4 red eyes, and covered on dark brown heavy plates that contrasted deeply with its vibrant yellow bioluminescent part. It looked like a mix between a sturgeon, a pike, and a bit of Dunkleistus. A dinycthoid, a subspecies to be precise. It's an exclusively carnivorous and extremely aggressive aquatic animal capable of living through dry seasons in a way quite similar to the now long since extinct lungfish of the Earth in this universe. It would dig itself into the ground and then encase itself in a protective cocoon of mucus before entering a vegetative-like state where nearly all of its metabolic function slowed down to a crawl until it rained again. If no rain were to come, it wouldn't be a problem, as they can practice auto-cannibalizing and eat their flesh to wait even longer. The fish's jaws clamped tightly at the throat of the peacock lystro, drawing copious amounts of red blood. "That's mine, you little shit," Liam thought, glaring at the fish that was slowly dragging his food into the river. Unhappy and quite furious about this sudden turn of events, he threw his javelin with deadly precision, the power behind it being just enough for it to not be lost 2 meters deep underground as it had happened before more than once. As the javelin flew through the air, the 30 meters, 99 feet, of distance traveled in the blink of an eye. In his now empty left hand appeared his current favorite weapon, his war scythe, and he ran straight at the fish with murder in his eyes. The javelin reached its target first, impaling the head of the squirming peacock Listro, ending its gurgled squeal of agony for good. The fish, uncaring why there wasn't any struggle, took advantage of this as it started to drag its dead prey, with even more vigor behind each movement of its large front fins, but Liam had already arrived and his scythe raised high, the polished claw serving as a curved blade gleamed ominously under the sun's light. With one powerful swing downward, the blade stabbed through its armored cranium with ease. The fish jolted before it jerked around erratically, tail slapping the ground with enough force to split a man's skull as if it was mere tofu. It never let go of the dead animal within its jaw. In fact, it bit even harder and its bioluminescent skin became a flamboyant red. Liam stepped to the side, dodging a tail slap. War scythe in hand, he repeated the same motion. This time the fish went completely limp, and the unarmored sides that had changed to red as if a flip was switched became a dull gray. He still stabbed it in the head 4 more times for good measure. You never know, animals are tenacious, even more here. He noted that it had bright blue blood like octopus or horseshoe crab, interestingly enough. 2 for the price of 1. Wonder how they taste. This fish in particular, what would be best, leaf grilled, marinated, or? So many choices. Liam said with a grin, his stomach rumbling in agreement. Flicking cleaver in the air, the blue blood was thrown on the grass. He looked around him to see if anything was threatening his prize. There was nothing aside from the other side of the river, where a herd of 57 elephant-sized dimetrodon-like animals could be seen peacefully grazing the vibrant grass trimming with life. It was a magnificent sight, but Liam didn't delude himself. Those won't hesitate 1 second to stomp him to death if he were on the other side. Dragging the 2 corpses away from the river bed, he started the lengthy process of storing them in his inventory. His body and mind as always were on high alert. He was vulnerable while doing so after all. An hour later he was back at his base and his smile vanished when a pleasant surprise greeted him in the form of hoof prints and 4-toed footprints around the muddy trail of his gateways. Gateways he could see someone had attempted to open and failed miserably. After all, when he was out he locked it from behind with tree trunks from the inside. He modified the gate the same day he gave the Na6 kids back to their clan. The footprints were of 1 Na6 and 1 dire horse that he could tell from their shape and arrangement. It didn't take a genius for that, and he could tell that they ran in panic. This pointed to the Na6 panic being tied to the sudden burst of fury he felt from Gladius around an hour ago, but at the time he simply thought that the baby great ostripede must have seen a creature that wasn't father, such as one of those 12-winged butterflies, and that as it dared to enter its breathing space and must be exterminated. Apparently, he was very wrong. My Patreon if you want to give me money and have chapters 1 have finished in advance. Patreon.com/user?U=60424165. 16. Professional Egg Stealer. Breathing in and out, Liam calmed the bubbling emotions raging in his mind, mostly anger at whoever tried to enter his base, his property while he was away. Once more anticipation and paranoia proved to be fruitful. A Na6 could have entered and stolen, or killed Gladius, or stolen his resource if not destroyed what he rebuilt. It would have been bad in all cases he could think of. The mere idea was enraging and put together with the last few days, even months. All of this caused him to be on edge, to say the least. He considered himself someone cool-headed and composed even before having his body switched and his very being changed on a fundamental level. Yet he had limits, ones he was far from reaching. But if how he killed the great ostripede was an indicator nobody wanted to be in his close vicinity when it would happen. Well, he wasn't a wild animal. Even when he snapped he stayed mostly conscious of his actions as he pummeled the alien bird to death. And he was in mortal danger. His body was in fight or flight response. The first was prevalent and he did what he did. Anger was bad, a problem he was aware of, but it was comparatively better being rightfully angry than in plain depression or feeling despair, as long it was directed and focused. But valid reasons to keep the ember of his anger kept on falling on his head. He didn't want to tempt Murphy, but it could always be worse. It was more of a coping mechanism than anything, one Liam was perfectly aware of but one that worked nonetheless. I might be overreacting. I likely am. They arrived in the middle of the day, Liam thought, calming himself, observing his surrounding. He moved to a patch of dirt with grass growing, crawling through a hole he could barely fit through, one tunnel's entrance. Tunnels that might need revamp in the way of needing some traps just in case some native gets too curious, some along the same design as narcotic trap wire should do wonders to unwelcome guests either if they have good or bad intentions. In the first place, walking through those tunnels for them when their adults are on average taller than the tallest humans is going to be a bit challenging. But prevention is better than cure. Then again, I don't know how Nasics interact with one another or their cultures for that matter, and neither do they know how humans interact with one another. It's a clusterfuck, he thought, walking in the dark and damp tunnel, slightly hunched over, his implant serving as an improvised flashlight. Honestly, it was empty though and meaningless. The only option was to find this mysterious and uninvited Nasics. Hearing happy familiar chirps from behind the wall made him smile and come back as he snapped out of his internal brooding. Moving through the tunnel, he noted how a part of it was still flooded and that bioluminescent plant mushroom hybrids were growing all around. There even were some kind of small pinkish killifish swimming in the still flooded areas. Likely from eggs laid there before, the movement of soil was probably at fault too. They weren't unique, as he detected via his implant that there was a lot of thing in the soil, seed, spore, and fish egg to various other animals' eggs. But those went mostly unnoticed. The same for microorganisms, as they continued to live on for a more or less long time unless they immediately died, as what was stored was put in a sort of protective bubble. It separated them from the void of the subspace that was his inventory. Also, the reason why more delicate things don't break or plants don't instantly die but keeping them for a long period still kills them, eventually. The degree of awareness for something to be storable was still unknown, but at least it must be less aware than your run-of-the-mill alien arthropods and more aware than alien microorganisms. The rules behind what can and what can't be stored were a bit fuzzy, but that's why testing was for. His inventory was his most versatile and arguably most powerful tool. Understanding it was the bare minimum. At the moment he hypothesized that it mostly depended on how much it was conscious, how potent for lack of a better word was its engrammic matrix, for whatever it truly represented, and how much it physically could move. All of it was ultimately only suppositions drawn from his knowledge of the techgrams, engrams for extremely advanced pieces of technology that could nearly pass for magic, mixed with his own intuition, so he thought it was bound to evolve. He was pretty much blind and could only poke around and see what worked and what didn't. A very common occurrence here is how he missed the internet. Exiting the tunnel, Liam was met with a very excited baby murder chicken waiting for him. Gladius had grown quite a bit. Now the chick was reaching up to a bit more than the middle of his abdomen, and the claws from its 2 3-fingered hands were growing, but at the moment on each digit, they were no more than 6 stubby black dots than anything, but it was a start. "Ow, who's my adorable murder chicken? It's you," the man cooed while scratching gently behind the start of one of the neural cues, like one would scratch behind the ear of their dog if the purring and feeling of commencement was an indicator. Gladius liked it. Liam stopped as an idea struck him. Grabbing one of the ends of the neural cue, the pink tendrils of nervous fibers shot out and weaved in the air before quickly coiling around his implant. A familiar prickling sensation later, and his pupils dilated, covering most of his gray irises. Closed his eyes, he focused on the mental connection with the implant and focused on Gladius' mind. Conveying feelings was easy, teaching Gladius words and their correlation in simple actions as well. However, more conceptual notions not directly in the shape of raw emotions were a bit more complicated. Liam knew it was mostly born out of his inexperience about this aspect, and that Gladius was not human and not even a month old, still a baby, a big murderous one, but a baby nonetheless. It wasn't like the Nasics where they became one in mind and body to whoever or whatever they do that Sahelu with, the connection between neural cues. Thought this was traded off by this link he had with his tame. Open mind memories, he sent, and what he got was a confused four-eyed gaze from Gladius before the hatchling opened its beak, and he got gray-purplish images of Gladius' favorite fruit and a sensation of hunger. Right after the hatchling closed its beak in confusion, as Liam mentally let it be known with amusement and a mental deadpan, it wasn't what he asked, but if it understand what he wanted it would have more food. He tried several other words and emotions, probing here and there, but none really worked. which showed on the hatchling as it grew frustrated, nearly looking as if it was going to cry, which made Liam feel bad. Frustrated, right? He felt like an idiot having missed the obvious. Anger, desire, death, enemy ran anger, and here the result was what he wanted. It was like using a very advanced virtual reality but with some very vague and diluted sensation. It was of Gladius being awakened from its rightful rest by strange sounds coming from the big moving thing that was the exit/entrance. At first, it thought it was Father coming back, but as it happily waddled closer it realized it wasn't. The voice was different. Liam notified it was the Gnostics language, even if distorted and different, as the memories were not heard with human ears, so if the one was female or male he didn't know. Its waddling became extremely aggressive as it shrieked something that promised a slow and gruesome death, but to Liam it was cute. It was followed by a panicked yelp combined with a neigh whistle-like sound and the sound of hoof clopping on mud before ultimately silence came back. Then a wave of smugness from Gladius, and at the exact same time the connection broke and Liam took lungfuls of air as he was unconsciously holding his breath until now. HAA. Okay, so it's possible. But it's disorienting. Guess my brain isn't truly wired for this, not that it matters, he mumbled, massaging his forehead in vain to get the new but slight headache to go away. Queep. Yes, you did good, buddy. Liam responded with a chuckle at the chirping. Gladius made it known it didn't get its food. The man gladly gave various fruits from his inventory he collected along the way to his base. But each fruit was earned by playing or doing what he asked. Which was around 50 kilograms, 110 pounds, mostly berries and also nuts, all gathered in this short time, proving how fertile the lands were. He tested all of them before to see which was good or bad, but he knew it wasn't the most useful of action, as what can be deadly for one species is what is needed for the continual survival of another. Such is the joy of the unknown. Though he still avoided giving the one that made him feel queasy. Gladius' nutritional need, aside from this discovery of the ability to access the memory of his one and only tame, thereby everything he could tame had a lot of potential. The first thing that came to him was scouting. Just like a scooting pet or familiar from an RPG. It was an exciting prospect and quite frankly a necessity now that he thinks about it. It certainly can't be one of those suicidal little shit. He thought about the potential choices while walking to the butchering stone slab. The dead armored fish was plopped on the slab and he started to cut its head off with a utility knife made of one of the smaller great ostrich claws. Yeah, those featherless flamingo eagle birds should do. Omnivorous and excessively more intelligent than those bats, not that it's particularly hard to beat them in that department. He thought of the tetrapterons while he started to fillet the fish, pleasantly surprised by the lack of fish bone. And also how the pure white flesh was quite similar to squid, at least in taste and texture, which brought new ideas about what he was going to cook. Squids were one of his favorite ingredients to work with. Anyway, to get his future scouting partner or partners, a simple plan, if that even be qualified as that, formed in his mind on how he was going to steal, no, permanently borrow without permission some tetrapteron's eggs. He studied the newly arrived wildlife enough to be sure of where they nested and that the tetrapterons were nesting at all for that matter. Day 71. Shining under the sun's Liam in his full bronze armor was threading around a tree of the exact same species as the one at his base, but this one was but a hallowed husk of what it once was, a husk of a tree still taller than the redwood Hyperion by a good 10 meters, 33 feet. The fact it was this intact was puzzling, with how often thunderstorms occurred, or it was why it was in such a state. Either way, it was of no importance. The gravity of Pandora is 20% weaker than that of Earth, pushing the limit of what was thought biologically possible on the old blue planet. And this species of tree tanking dozens of lightning strikes are not even close to the tallest species of tree on the moon, and that by quite a significant amount. A simple small triangular wood and leather shield with hints of bronze was strapped by a piece of leather to his right forearm, while on his left forearm was his wrist crossbow. His armor was nearly hermetic to any potential harm that might arrive at the meat bag inside that was Liam. Above, the sound of cawing could be heard as the 36 figures of 4-winged featherless birds, in most shades and colors from light purple to royal blue with the occasional orange to almost black. He wasn't exactly sure if they even were of the exact same species or if it was a particularity of theirs. In any case, they were quite beautiful creatures, if a bit vicious looking. His line of sight, while limited by his helmet, didn't bother him. He already memorized multiple paths to climb and to go down. But he knew it was still limiting and will prove to be an inconvenience. The option of falling straight to the ground has been taken into consideration and from a certain height judged as acceptable. While climbing a redwood-sized tree in full armor sounds incredibly silly and stupidly dangerous, still, the case is straight up impossible if you weren't passed beyond what was humanly acceptable in strength, endurance, and speed. His armor felt like regular clothing, its weight was barely noticeable to him. The only annoying aspect was that it made him less agile. And Liam didn't have much other option unless he wanted his flesh lacerated, fingers bitten off, eyes eaten out, and other such joyful-sounding potential injuries that no sane man wanted to live through. He didn't doubt 1 second that those usually shy creatures will lose it when he takes their blood and flesh encapsulated in calcium right in front of their four-eyed gazes, or even before that, as some were already warily observing him. Some animals on this moon would do far more for far less. And if someone were to try stealing what was his, he would act this way too. Well, let's go. No risk taken, no reward earned, Liam said to no one but himself as encouragement, and started to climb, his boots with hooks for better gripping strength. Not forgetting 2 pieces of modified claws from great ostropede vestigial wings serving as climbing pikes that could hold his weight, and some more, but just to be safe he had 4 more, 1 set attached to his hip and another in his inventory. He was a professional after all. He came prepared, though if it was enough he wasn't sure, as he needed to take his weight plus his inventory into consideration and potential hazard. My Patreon if you want to give me money and have chapters 1 have finished in advance. Patreon.com/user?U=60424165. 17. Unexpected but expected and uninvited guest. Climbing in all of its forms before had been something Liam was never really a fan of. The first time he did rock climbing when he was 13 years old, an accident happened and it resulted in his pelvis breaking in 4. This let him know the joy of being bedridden for weeks in constant pain while not on painkillers, and after there was the joy of needing to relearn how to walk normally while otherwise being forced to move around in a wheelchair, unable to have any real freedom for the next 6 months. Fun. Though it was quite different here, being physically able to do feats that he would have never thought he could do, such as doing a double backflip on command, 1-finger handstand even if he fell a lot at first, or bending metal with ease, changed quite a lot about how he saw the world and lived in general. It gave confidence, a sense of safety to a certain degree, but not arrogance, at least that is what he thought, as he knew more than anyone that he is not even remotely close to being unkillable, the long diagonal scar on his back being proof of this fact. Humans themselves are already capable of extraordinary feats, and for him, those possible feats are only amplified and expanded. He could beat all sports world records with ease if he ever wanted, aside from gymnastics or others that needed a stupid amount of flexibility. Evidently, he was strong, but not to the point of him stopping a tractor-trailer truck dead in its tracks, but smaller vehicles, depending on how fast, how heavy they are, and on what ground he is on, that Liam possibly could. Climbing a dead tree even this tall was not hard physically speaking. It was more on the fact that the tree was more of an extremely smooth pylon of dead organic matter that had nearly all other holds, such as branches and holds, mostly gone, the possibility of random holes due to mold or rot he couldn't see. And also the tetrapterons flying around. Planting one climbing pike after another, he lifted his body, spiked boots stabilizing him as he carefully climbed, all his senses focused on what he was doing in his surroundings. One of his objectives was 80 meters, 262 feet 5, above the ground, in the form of a blackened branch leading straight to a hole in the dead tree. Hearing the distorted eagle screech mixed with crow caws informed him that his presence has been detected and is not welcomed. One of the tetrapteron that was flying in a circle finally decided to get rid of the strange shining humanoid creature, a creature that felt off, and one that was climbing to their nesting place. Diving silently, its full wingspan of 5 meters, 4 feet 9, wingspans of 4 wings spread evenly, the alien bird rapidly gained in speed and momentum, its sharp claws at the end of its talons opened to tear flesh apart. Then it hit, claws slamming against the creature's shining head. The impact was violent, destabilizing Liam, who was in the process of setting his left climbing pike into the dead trunk, nearly making him lose his grip and almost causing him to slip on his footing. It was more out of the surprise than anything. He didn't hear the tetrapteron until it hit the back of his helmeted head. They were very silent flyers. Growling in annoyance, Liam moved half-consciously half-instinctively by slamming his climbing tool against the Tetrapteron, scratching and clawing at his helmet while it was cawing aggressively. The short surprised and pained squawk accompanied by the familiar squelching sound of metal hitting flesh followed, not forgetting the one of bone cracking, was a good indication it didn't take the hit very well. The weight on his head was gone, and with a now bloodied climbing pike he continued on. The dead Tetrapteron plummeted ungraciously through the 40 meters, 131 ft, of air before it hit the ground and tainting the vibrant green of the grass red. There was silence in the incessant cawing and screeching which Liam took note of. He didn't stop in his endeavor, climbing the tree at a speed of more or less 2 meters per second, 6.6 feet per second. Time was of the essence. He was soon interrupted by the metallic clink of stones hitting his bronze shoulder pad. This was followed by more projectiles hitting him as the Tetrapterons picked up stones, sticks, and fruits and more as they started pelting him with those. They are smart. Good, but quite annoying and dangerous here. Normal reaction considering what I have planned. I suppose, Liam thought, his breathing regulated. He was happy about their show of intelligence even if it was admittedly not the most effective on him. However, he never stopped progressing as the flock of alien birds got more and more agitated, never stopping pelting him with what was light enough for them to carry and throw. One, like its predecessor, seeing the armored creature dangerously approaching their nest, dived at him, this time at the exact moment he was stabbing his climbing pike higher in the dead hardwood. It attacked his other hand with only a real hold on the bark. The one that dived first had little success, as Liam, even if surprised by this sudden change of behavior, was aware that they could try doing that again. His hold never wavered. The courageous Tetrapteron got its body crushed by the shield as Liam slammed his right arm on the dead trunk with the bird in between. This was but a short interlude, as finally, he was at arm's length of the blackened branch. Testing with 1 foot, he remarked that compared to the rest it was mushy and covered in a grey moss mold-like thing that would have smelled foul if there wasn't the wind and his helmet in between. It was the same color of the bark in a way he couldn't have told from below, and now it was the only way up where he needed to go down and climb from an entirely different side. It wobbled, seemed thin, and clearly a hazard to climb through. Internally cursing as the distance was larger than he would have liked but close enough to not be a problem, he took a deep breath, calming his beating heart and hammering in his ears. Adrenaline coursed through his veins aplenty. Internally cursing again for his lack of sanity, he swiveled himself to the side, and at this exact moment 5 small screeching bodies decided to slam into his back, causing him to half scream half curse. He was destabilized, but he still managed to jump, leaving a climbing pike behind. The feeling of being airborne when nearly 100 meters above the ground was one of the most terrifying moments of his life, but also one of the most exhilarating. This feeling, however, was short-lived as he directed his jump toward the rotted area trunk, but it came back right after. As to his befuddlement, he traveled through it as if it was a paper wall. What he was met with was a spacious hollow cavity with wells of sunlight from holes above and Tetrapterons resting on sort of alcoves or flying around. However, at that moment, he could care less. Twisting his body in the air, he instinctively oriented himself and planted his right climbing pike on the wall of the tree, slowing down his short but very dangerous fall to a stop. Liam stayed like that for half a second, one hand holding his entire body weight while his brain rapidly processed what just happened. He sighed in relief, not noticing the grin that had appeared on his face. He ignored the echoing screech. AMD took out a new climbing pike from his inventory. He then exchanged the one he used to stop his fall as it was too damaged for the one on his hip. Planting both, he finally stabilized himself and observed his surroundings. Eyes trailing over every nest, old and new, he felt his grin widen as he climbed around, shoving or killing the occasional Tetrapterons that got too close or attacked him. Yes, they're eggs. I didn't do that for nothing, he cried out in joy and relief. This insanely stupid gamble and equally stupid actions of his proved to be worth it. He wasn't even 100% sure if he was going to find something, or if they were going to be eggs, or if those birds laid eggs at all for that matter. Though nothing has hatched yet, so no crying for victory, as all of what he did might still be pointless. A bit of realistic pessimism here and there keeps you grounded and never hurts. Storing the 3 bright, slightly transparent orange and perfectly round eggs in his inventory, his gauntlet not bothering the action. He noticed that they weighed the same as those of gooses. He also noted that of the 3 only one was fertilized. The scan of his implant only confirmed it. He wasn't disappointed by that discovery, far from it. it meant omelette was on the menu. He would have felt hunger at the idea if the smell down here wasn't so horrendously puke-inducing in a way similar to a hen pen that wasn't cleaner for months but 10 times worse as the air was hot and humid. He didn't know how he could live through this smell. The helmet helped but not by much. The man didn't waste time idling on the smell. He moved around multiple nests, most empty. He slapped the occasional tetrapterons aside as he ransacked 3 more nests full of eggs, stealing the nests themselves right after. Nests that sported some similarities to the part he bulldozed through to enter the tree by accident. This led to multiple possibilities as to why this is the case, but the most likely was the tetrapterons cultivated or made this substance as a sort of glue or building block. He also lost 1 more climbing pike to 2 tetrapterons, cutting down his stock of 6 from when he started to a measly 2. And that's when Liam decided that with 5 fertilized eggs he had enough. He was greedy but not that much. He pondered shortly where he should exit before deciding to climb down from where he was, not wanting to test his luck any further than that. Once he had climbed down to the very bottom of the hollow tree where the ground was mostly made of guano, bones, and other remains he couldn't and didn't want to distinguish. This disgusting mixture reaching up to his ankle was the source of the smell that made his stomach retch in disgust, but it piqued his mind's interest as it potentially could be used as fertilizer, considering it might be similar to guano, the white gold, a potent fertilizer. But it's neither the time nor the place, Liam remarked, walking through it carefully to not slip or if there are potential holes at random places or if it was deeper. His boots sadly were not hermetic enough and some of the mixtures infiltrated within to his great displeasure, but he didn't complain. Steel pickaxe materialized in his left hand. He started to literally dig his way out of this place. 1 hour later he was looking down at the 30 meters, 98 feet 5, of void separating from the ground from his new point dug straight from the hollow of the dead tree. This made him realize why he didn't feel the tree was that hollow and that he couldn't have really dug his way into it from the outside at this height in the first, as he would have been constantly harassed by the tetrapterons and a plethora of other problems. Climbing down was easy as all tetrapterons were too preoccupied with looking at what was stolen and covering the damage in the paper wall, covered whole of the trunk he traveled through. Nothing attacked him on his way back, likely due to the smell, which he was both thankful and annoyed by. He was a bit weary from his little climbing experience, so him not needing to uselessly kill anything that suicidally threw itself at him was always a bonus. As soon as he arrived he verified his traps and took a 2-hour shower where he rubbed himself off the grim, a full body wash to get rid of the smell, and he succeeded, but he knew he would need several more to be really rid of it. He didn't want to go into one such tree where those creatures nested ever again, but the differences between wanting and needing are vast. This was followed by him cleaning and checking his armor and equipment. They needed to be taken care of if he didn't want an unforeseen event of them breaking at crucial moments. Even more so with how he brutalized them daily. The following week passed without anything extraordinary happening. He worked more on the bastardized fabricator, the usual hunting and what came with it, and resource collecting each day to achieve a set objective. The most important task was finishing his incubator for the tetrapteron's eggs. It was dug into the ground in a way it stayed hermetic and no water infiltrated, an area impenetrable by sunlight too, far from the tree in any of its roots, same as other aspects of his base. It was a natural and dangerous lightning rod, might as well not let everything close to it like the first time, so he moved most of his stuff away. This also led to an increase in his wall range and the need to build abodes, wood and stone structures to protect everything that could be protected. The parameters of this primitive incubator were controlled to a certain extent, them being degree temperature, humidity, and aeration. If they ever weren't right, he simply stored them in his inventory. It was easy to monitor the fetus's development with their eggshells, the opposite of Gladius' egg, which was so opaque and dense that even with the bright light trick he couldn't see anything inside it. And all seemingly developed well with their kidnapper's meticulous care, aside of course from his first blunder where he killed one by overexposure to the suns, reducing their number from 5 to 4, a blunder he was displeased of, but admittedly this was why he took more than one to begin with. In the morning, the closest sun was shining upon the Great Plain, and Liam was currently underground following his new routine. A routine that consisted of checking the few traps within the tunnels of his bases, which was followed by him checking for footprints or the like all around his base and if the wall held well as well. Footprints and the tracks they made suffered from the fact that they didn't survive long in the kind of environment he lived in, and he wasn't the utmost expert in them either. But he didn't find anything related to them. However, at various other places he found unnaturally placed bones close to what looked like buried campfires. He found 2 of such places, and they were quite far from his base and one another. The most notable find in them was close to one of the rivers where he hunted. A bone of an unknown animal showed the carving of a big 6-legged creature, a Vanator, one that almost looked lifelike. There was depth, shadow, and a sense of motion. Changing your angle of vision also changed what was shown to a degree, giving it life. The almost because of the long cut straight in the middle. One he could recognize as a mistake of inattention. One that pissed off the carver greatly, a feeling he could understand. Investing time and energy into something to fuck up at the last second was very, very aggravating. Clearly, nothing you would think people with around Neolithic level of technology capable of. Then again, art and technology are not forcibly mutually inclusive, and it was an alien world. It was exceptionally good carving nonetheless, better than what he could do from an aesthetic standpoint, which was logic. And he preferred function over form, but he wouldn't say no if both are met if possible. And that made him curious about who made it and the technique used. Anyways, he was currently staring at the snapped string, broken ceramic container until his gaze traveled to the tall blue, dangerously skinny, narcotically induced unconscious body barely fitting in the tunnel. The body was splayed in a way that would suggest panic and dread before ultimately falling unconscious. Liam's facial expression rapidly shifted from anger to disappointment, to pity, before ultimately shifting to a unique mix of the 3, but with cold shimmering anger at the forefront. Far from home it seems, and you surely don't seem the type to make art, he said, all emotion muted after having turned the unconscious body around and recognized the face, even if the cheeks were sunken, lips busted, various scars that weren't there before, and his left ear cut from the base. My Patreon if you want to give me money and have chapters 1 have finished in advance. Patreon.com/user?u=60424165. 18. Doing what is necessary. Tswarin's mind slowly came to consciousness, though fuzzy and incoherent, his body worn out and starved. The Nausica's mind cleared further as his only good ear flicked at the soft sound of something scratching against something. Feelings of his weakened limbs slowly came back to him, and with it, the pain, one in particular around his neck, wrists, and feet. His eyes snapped open and he immediately tried to run away as far as possible, but it was impossible. His back slammed against the pillar to which he was bound. Trying to get up again he failed, his feet tied, arms twisted uncomfortably with his wrist clamped down. The bound on his neck was tired to something behind, keeping him grounded for good, and each movement slowly choked him. His heart hammered in his chest as his feeble muscles fought in vain. His eyes, filled with terror, darted everywhere looking for a way out, one that didn't exist. Walls were all the Nausics could see until his eyes locked onto the demon's almost unnaturally gray ones. Next to him was also a small creature sleeping peacefully in a ball. A creature that was both familiar and alien, but his mind was not in the place to care about this detail. "Ah, you're finally awake," the demon said coldly as he stopped sharpening his strange weapon, a war scythe, not that the Nausics could know. Then he spoke again, slowly, standing to his full height, appearing taller and more intimidating than any human should have the right to, not that they knew of any other human. "You're scared? Don't look at me like I'm the monster here, or the word demon should be more apt, as it is somewhat close in meaning, right? You came here yourself. The source of so many nightmares, pain, and horror he lived through far from his clan and his family since that event where he failed to kill him and was exiled, forced to cut one of his ears as a mark of his crime for his exile. His thoughts were muddled by fear and hate. The humans spoke in this same strange language of theirs, but this time daring to use a word of the people within, the voice sounding muffled. As the demon moved closer, Tswarin's despair and effort to flee kept on increasing. He tried to speak out threats and hiss, but what came out? Only incoherent sounds came out. Crouching down to meet the eyes level of Tswarin, the demon blinked. His two cold gray eyes seemed vacant for a split second before a hopeless sigh escaped his lips. A bone knife. His bone knife appeared out of thin air in the demon's left hand, causing Tswarin to reel back in shock. The terror he felt until now amplified even further at the sheer impossibility of what just occurred. They were wrong, that Sahik and Oloikton were wrong, he was right, whatever this creature did was not normal, nobody should be able to do this. And whatever he did to help the two youngsters were not out of good intent. You can't understand my words and wouldn't if you could in the state you are, but I still wanted to tell you this, or maybe it's to myself. I was going to help you, you have lived through some shit recently, I can see that, I pitied you even if you tried to kill me once. I was going to help you back into full health, how I wish it was to be the case, but, the demon trailed off, his voice getting lower and lower, almost turning into a growl. Flicking the dagger, a purplish liquid fell. Poison, one made of a mixture of berries, one that wouldn't have killed me, but there shouldn't be poison if your intentions were to ever be peaceful in the beginning, not that intruding into someone else's home armed in the middle of the night is ever good. He spun the knife into a good handling position one normally would take for a short sword rather than a knife. I truly don't have any desire to do this, but I'm selfish and my survival comes first before anything else, and you're a threat. I would have left you be, but you had to do this. You brought this upon yourself, the demon continued, each word getting colder, more frigid than the last, even as he clutched the handle of the knife hard enough to cause the wood it was made to start splintering. The demon moved again, Swarin's eyes filled with primal terror zoomed toward the bone blade as it was oriented toward the right side of his head. The realization of his situation finally hit the Nausicaa, and all he could feel was true despair, anger, and even regret. However, it was too late. Tears started to trickle down his sunken cheeks as he tried for the umpteenth time to struggle, stand up, and run away. But all it did was tighten the rope that bound him even further, as Liam had intended for it to do, but the Nausicaa, even if ignorant of this fact, still kept on thrashing around as the ropes literally strangled him. All the little rationality left and slowly slipped into mindless hysteria. A flash of hesitation passed through Liam's eyes at the scene unfolding before him for the briefest of instants, before his right hand shouted out, grabbing solidly the Nausica's forehead, ending all the struggle as Swarin froze. Unable to move, instinct screaming in disarray. Keeping eye contact with the Nausicaa, Liam's face hardened as the hold of his left hand on the dagger tightened further. Breathing calmly, Liam acted, with one swift, clean, and strong motion the blade stabbed with laughable ease through Swarin's skull. There was a sharp pain the Nausicaa felt before his world, fear, and despair disappeared all at once. The blade stopped halfway in the skull as the curved tip poked through the other side of the cranium. Rapid and effective, no need for more pointless suffering. Taking out the dagger, Liam kept eye contact with the now dead dulled eyes and their unmistakable frozen terror in them for a time until he manually closed them. His hand holding the bloodied dagger was steady as his gaze moved to it, and he sheathed it back into the leather strap around the Nausicaa's chest. He didn't feel guilt, remorse, or the need to throw up at his action. He only felt as if a metaphorical weight was lifted off his shoulder, yet he wasn't happy nor did feel any kind of real satisfaction at the Nausicaa's suffering, terrified gaze and death, which he was extremely relieved for. The opposite, in fact. And one of the reasons as to why he didn't immediately kill the unconscious Nausicaa after discovering the poisoned blade. A sort of twisted sense of curiosity for this exact purpose, and the response he got was mixed and made him learn a lot about himself. It was easy. Too easy. Perhaps due to my hatred toward him or the rational need to get rid of a threat, or that he wasn't human, or all combined. But doing this and taking the life of someone shouldn't feel so easy and normal, Liam thought, puzzled and mildly horrified by his own train of thoughts and how he should feel about this. It was off-putting, inhuman to some degree, this apathy, desensitization to the act, even if it was someone he hated. Maybe the Nausicaa's word held some inkling of truth. Liam didn't know if he always was this way or if it was from the moment he arrived, or a mix of both. It didn't matter, however, as it was him and only him at the end who chose to do it. But ultimately, if what he did was good or bad was subjective and depended on more factors and points of view than one can count, the Nausicaa was depressed, sick, injured, starved, and past the point one would call the breaking one. But why was he in such a state? Liam could have helped the Nausicaa, but he didn't. He wasn't going to save someone who tried to kill him for no reason, and very much in the middle of trying a second time. It was asking for a third attempt, one with a greater chance of success. People when set on one thing don't tend to change that easily, and Liam wasn't patient enough for those people to change, even less when it directly put himself and what he held in extreme and immediate danger. Cowardly to a certain degree for some, but Liam took this as being rational and not being a naive moron. Not everyone can be changed or even want to. Or even deserve such an opportunity. Sighing pensively about all of it, it was life he supposed, he would have killed someone at some point and he surely will need to do so again in the future. He just hoped it won't happen much. It felt casual and it shouldn't be, but it was. From another point of view, it was good in fact that he was calm and that his first kill was in a controlled environment, but all of it didn't equal him liking it. Hearing Gladius chirp and arrive behind him made him blink. He scratched the back of the murder chicken's head until it made a purr-like sound. It was curiously looking at the corpse but lost interest pretty fast, completely different than prior when he dragged the unconscious body and had to forcefully calm down the bird or the Gnostics would have been killed right away. "We can play after I take care of this," Liam said, and Gladius tilted its head to the side. Even if the little guy passed most of its time either sleeping or eating due to it being so young, it still needed plenty of mental stimulation. Something Liam was happy to oblige when he could, but something Gladius didn't really understand. It was mentally exhausting at times, but something he was also glad. He severely needed those times of relaxation. One right now would be good. The following hours passed as Liam dug a hole far away from his base. He had already incinerated most of the body and crushed what survived the heat to avoid any would-be scavenger from digging it out. Not born of his respect for the dead, this one particular, but to get rid of any would-be physical evidence. No one could directly link him to him having killed the Gnostics, or if they do he can lie. So he didn't fear any retribution, and it was obvious from how this Gnostics acted that he was alone in his physical condition wasn't a good enough indicator. Why it was the case Liam wasn't sure and didn't exactly care all that much, exile being at the forefront, adding that one of his ears was cut and cauterized and the tip of his neural queue was cut or bitten off. And in the middle of regrowing, which meant it truly wasn't him with the horse. Exiled conceivably because of him, well that must have been how the Gnostics thought, and what did it earn him? Nothing but suffering and death, and only the last Liam was partially responsible as it wasn't him who searched or even truly wanted to kill the Gnostics. However, Liam felt freer as the one who was lurking around was finally dead. If it was the one who alarmed Gladius he didn't know. But surely the possibility of there being more Gnostics out looking for him for whatever reason, be it good, bad, or neutral, was clear, and the reason why he will keep the traps all nice and ready. Such as the still unknown bone carver, it didn't seem like the kind of thing someone in despair and starving would do in his pastime. Day 79. Liam was moving along the Great Plain at a pace one would consider for an Olympic marathon, but for him was a simple jog. He was roughly half a kilometer from the shore and 2 hours and a half away at the same speed he was moving from his base, so approximately 25 kilometers per hour, 15.53 miles per hour. This was without the pause to drink, eat and take a breather. He was exploring to find new areas of potential interest, notably but not uniquely easier access to the cave system below the Great Plain than the giant grottos, as they clearly were not the safest place to use for cave diving, and why he still didn't explore them. Not that cave diving on Earth was ever safe, to begin with, even less so on an alien moon with a penchant for fauna and flora affected by gigantism. The potential of getting lost, however, was minor in his mind, as he could locate himself thanks to his link with his tame, but he didn't use this as a crutch, as even then his sense of direction was extremely good. In front of him was the spot where the shore and the plain met. Growing out from the gravel beach and sea he could see a series of small high islands void of any visible life that formed a sort of archipelago where the seawater surrounding was shallow, but from the look of it was but temporary, as tide, even if different from Earth, existed hers. The thing however that truly piqued his interest was the yellow, ranging from bright yellow to pale almost white yellow stone that was everywhere, from around ponds and thin streams of boiling turquoise water to the column of stone emitting steam. Turquoise water that was denser than seawater. A hot spring or some sort of shore thermal vent. And sulfur, a lot of it to boot, Liam thought, eyes narrowing as he carefully approached one of the smaller islands, not forgetting to put on a pair of boots and gauntlets. This part was nearly connected to the gravel beach. His nose wrinkled as the distinct smell of rotted egg wafted over him thanks to a sudden shift in the sea breeze. Indeed it's sulfur, he remarked with a smile appearing on his face at this confirmation. He absolutely needed it, and as soon as that thought passed his mind he felt the ground rumble. He backed far away, knowing what was going to happen. And just as anticipated from the pond, he just moved away a highly pressurized jet of steam and water high into the clear blue sky. The remnant of the heated air washed over his face with no consequence besides the unpleasant smell, and that it was slightly irritating to his eyes. A shower of extremely acidic and boiling water was the last thing he wanted. The chances were it wasn't going to kill him at all unless he took a dip directly inside one of the ponds and stayed inside for some time. Chances he didn't want to take. But just the idea of chemical burn and third-degree burn from scalding hot acidic water was a good enough deterrent for him to tread with the utmost care and avoid the deadly turquoise water at all costs. Steel pickaxe appearing from his inventory with a mental command, Liam switched it to his right hand and tapped with the metal tips one of the knee-high pale yellow stone columns, easily breaking it from the base while he held it in place as he waited for it to be stored. This procedure was repeated a dozen times over the various variants in the color of the stone that contained. Liam noted that there was a variation in purities depending on how intense the yellow was. The more intense the color, the purer the sulfur. But they were usually too close to the sulfuric water for his comfort. It's not like the purity was even a problem to him. Processes to purify it existed. At worst it cost time. Prime materials are rarely if ever found pure depending on what it is, and pure doesn't mean better either, it always depends. Now he had the last missing pillar of the triad to make black powder, aka gunpowder. Not that it was the only use for sulfur, far from it, but he always had an affinity for explosions, in video games that is, but that still counts for something considering the new reality he is in. My Patreon if you want to give me money and have chapters 1 have finished in advance. Patreon.com/user?U60424165. 19. Hatching. Several days later. This should do it, Liam mumbled as he put the final touch on a fist-sized ceramic ball closed up by a wood cork, and a fuse. It was a grenade, a very primitive one. He had managed to make around 40 kilograms, 88 pounds, of gunpowder in this short time frame since he got his sulfur. The only thing stopping him from making more was his current lack of potassium nitric, aka saltpeter. It wasn't a problem, just that he would need to get more from the small cave near the area where he got chalk. He didn't collect that much of it at the time because he didn't know when this would come into use, and he lost half of it in the big thunderstorm anyway, so he would have required more either way. Speaking of loss, he put every resource sensitive to the Wii of Pandora's random weather into their own receptacles with the right condition to be stored. The recipients were then put into big clay boxes plated with wood planks and reinforced with even more clay and stone, then put right underground into a safe area, far from the root system's electrifying effect, and the tree was struck by lightning or the powerful wind or water rained down like the flood or the three combined. Now that he had explosive and flammable stuff, this was even more of a necessity. Quite a time-consuming side project that was still ongoing and that in concept will likely never truly end. You never have enough resources and as such never have enough storage. The only way to access them was via a trapdoor situated right below his cabin, still in the process of building, more precisely next to his bed, if a pile of animal hides and makeshift pillow of gladius counted as can be called that. Still more comfortable than branches or the hard sapwood of a tree though. Back to the present, he wasn't at his base, preferring to not test explosives in his own house, because that's what he was going to do. A small rectangular piece of metal attached by a cord through a hole to a neatly carved flint appeared in his left hand, a flint and steel. One piece each between two fingers, he flicked them together close to the fuse, a spark was created and the short piece of rope was lit. Liam mentally counted as he threw the grenade in the sky with the right amount of force for the lighted fuse to not fizzle out. As his internal countdown reached 0, a quite loud bang resonated, and a small ball of fire vanished as sound as it appeared. Small creatures scurried or flew away at the explosion. It was weak, he noted, but still extremely dangerous to whoever was in its radius, as it was still a grenade, and quite loud, maybe not enough to effectively pop eardrums but enough to stun someone or cause chaos. A far cry from other grenades, he had the inner workings of such as one that when detonated formed a small gravitational singularity that could either, depending on the mode chosen, attract or repel omnidirectionally everything in a set area with a very dangerous amount of force. Yet he couldn't do much in terms of pure power but increasing the quantity of gunpowder inside as such the size of the container at the moment, most complex explosive compounds were needed for that and for them he needed more equipment he didn't have for the moment. However, the problem at the moment was the method of lighting the fuse. They aren't really of much use in direct confrontation if they stayed like this, but it was normal. He only did this to test how powerful they were and the quantity needed for a given explosion to not waste gunpowder. And to make shit blew up too, but that was just a bonus. Bullets and guns were still in progress as he wanted something functional that wouldn't blow in his hand or not work at a crucial time. Explosions are good, controlled and focused explosions are better. All of his inner thoughts were interrupted by a shift in the mental link. Liam suddenly felt Gladius become agitated, one that quite confused him for the briefest of moments. His mood flipped in a second and without much more thought he ran straight back to his base in less than half a minute. Seeing nothing around the base that indicated the passing of people, Liam relaxed slightly, but the crescendo of agitation from his tame told him something was happening and he had an inkling of what. Running straight at his gateway he jumped, hand latching on the side of the big structure. He lifted his entire body weight with one hand and flipped himself in the air. His little climbing experience in and out of the dead tree was a real eye-opener on what he could do, and so he did train and explore a bit on this aspect. Though he was far from remotely being skilled enough in parkour and acrobatics, considering he never did this kind of thing before, his body's natural instinctive movement, general awareness, sense of balance, and speed let it be fairly easy to do what he just did after a few trial and error, however. And it was awesome to be able to do this and to feel so free. The lack of fear is the true factor here. It's insane how much it changed things. Landing softly within his base he ran straight at Gladius, who was glaring at the door leading to the incubation room, its long biometallic claws scraping loudly against one another. The juvenile great ostropede now almost reached his shoulder and had started to show some change in color around its crest, taking on a deeper brighter orange with deeper dark blue color and a bit of light blue along the double-ended tails. But it wasn't the moment to admire his tame. Gladius looked behind while the man hastily passed right next to the bird, a reassuring scratch below the neck instantly calming the murder bird down, and he entered the incubator room. Walking over he saw the 4 slightly transparent eggs, more particularly the chicks inside trying to break free from their prison, his presence and the low whistle he was doing serving as an encouragement to the 4. Liam patiently waited, implant lighting dimly the room, one room where an incubator lay and another where he put various things he didn't know what to do with, such as the carved bones he found and a halfway done bone structure found in the belly of those armored fish. His wait was not long as one chick finally broke free from its egg. It made a low-winded chirp as its proportionally big fully developed eyes opened and stared at everything before locking onto him with roughly the same gaze Gladius had when it hatched. Then another broke free and did just as the first, then a third and a fourth, all hatchlings in a short period, as if they were waiting for him to hatch, which might just be the case. He brought a basket filled with soft material from inventory and crouched down in front of the 4 observant hatchlings. They all tried to move in his direction but each failed spectacularly in their own way. It was adorable even if just from the egg he could see the serrated teeth in their beak. There were new details he couldn't have noticed while they were in their eggs. First was that 2 had the nub that looked like the start of a horn, and another was their colors, each sporting a small but distinct difference in color. One had a deep red on its back and tails, another was of various hues purple and blue, and the 2 others had this small horn, the great difference being that one had a small paler yellow on all of its 4 wings and the last had a deep forest green around its 4 pairs of eyes, slowly fading at the breathing holes at the base of its neck. Deciding to not waste more time and officially tame them, he picked them delicately in the middle of the basket before putting his left hand in the middle of it. The 4 chirped and huddled toward the wide open palm looking for heat. Each moved toward one finger, except yellow and green, who pushed one another for the ownership of his thumb. Baby animals were nearly always adorable. Liam studied their body and found the start of the neural cues. The pair grew out of their chest and nearly as long as their own body, bodies that were no bigger than your average newborn goslings. With the utmost care, he grasped one of the green hatchling's neural cues. It squeak chirped, attracting the attention of the others. Liam swore he saw a kind of envy in their gaze. The small tendril touched his implant, his eyes dilated and he got a glimpse of the newborn pure mind who, just as Gladius did, instability submitted to him, and a new link was made until death set them apart. The shift from the juvenile great ostropede told that it felt it as well. Your name shalt be Orion, he named the green one through the connection, then said hatchling barely holding on to awakeness fell asleep wings grabbing his index finger. This process was repeated 3 more times, the red one was named Mary, the blue and purple one Septen, and the yellow one Oxiden. The 4 cardinal points, Orion, green, for east, Mary, red, for south, Septen, purple and blue, for north, and Oxiden, yellow, for west, all from their Latin counterpart or more precisely the first few letters of the dead language words. And the batch was half male half female, the one with a horn being the female, a piece excellent of new. He knew this aspect instinctually which put the question on what gladius is in that aspect but that was one for another time. Biology is complex with more exceptions than rules, like a certain language. Why would this differ from the biology of another world? Liam was now realizing he couldn't move all that much without waking up any of the hatchlings for 2 good reasons. They were cute and letting them rest was of utmost importance as they were just born. 3 of his fingers being held hostage by the newborn tetrapteron, his thumb grabbed by both using them as some sort of pillow or heat source, likely both but with an inclination toward the latter. Fuck. Day 93. Jogging in the vibrant green, Liam was on his way to his base, buckets filled with a fluid of plant's origin in his inventory. If a comparison could be drawn then it would be the equivalent of the latex produced by rubber trees to protect themselves from pests and bacteria and also help heal potential wounds. This latex-like substance of a bloody red was bloodletted from a small purplish thorny tree with human-sized tear-shaped leaves, quite the distinct difference from the milky white latex milked from rubber trees. The method to collect it, even if he named it bloodletting from the very dubious and counterproductive method used to cure various illnesses in ancient times, was essentially the same as the one used to get latex from rubber trees. This bloody latex has the potential to be used as a replacement for Earth's natural rubber. Further testing will be needed to see how to process it effectively, but the potential was there and something he needed as well. He needed a lot of things. It's a material used nearly everywhere for its various unique combination of properties ranging from flexibility, good heat resistance, high tensile strength, water resistance, and so much more. It was understandable why he would like and needed to have such material at hand. He suddenly stopped moving as the chopping but the muffled sound of rotors entered his ears, his heart beat faster into his chest, his mind working into various possibilities as he snapped his head into the direction of the origin of the sound. Then he saw it, roughly 200 meters, 256 feet, above and away from him, an engine with 2 tilt rotors, an elongated airframe, a cockpit on each of its sides was a missile pod, rear cargo doors open with machine guns poking out. Attached to the middle of the landing slides was a long cable, at the end of it was a great ostropede, a small one but definitely bigger than Gladius. Likely unconscious instead of dead from the careful strap and position it was in. It was an aircraft. His first thought, if bizarre, was that it was primitive on multiple points and could be improved with enough time and resources, but this thought was dashed as soon as it came. People, Liam mumbled, eyes focused on the Aerospatiale SA-2 Samson. He didn't know what he should do at that moment, not that any of his actions would have resulted in anything worthwhile the aircraft as it passed by him and was already shrinking in the horizon. At the same time in the aircraft, the humans inside were joyfully talking about their successful hunt and capture of this living specimen the Samson was carrying. Look at the size of these things. Imagine the damage it could cause if it reaches you. Luckily nothing good old .60 cal in the noggin can't fix, even if it needed freaking to. Ethan Scorby, a man in his late 30s, exclaimed as he put himself next to a 2 meter, 6 feet 6, long metallic claw. It was answered by eye rolls or cheer except for one. I really think I need more sleep. It was just my imagination, Miguel spoke under his breath, shaking his head in amusement at the sheer impossibility of what he just saw. Taking off his helmet and putting it aside, he scratched his bald head in annoyance. A forceful tap on his shoulder and he glared at the blonde-haired woman behind him. Her eyebrow was raised and he sighed before saying what he believed he just saw to his fellow Assiciops. Of course, a man wearing some sort of medieval armor in the middle of fuck all nowhere on Pandora. While you're at it, why not had he come from an alternate universe? It totally makes sense, but please don't stone yourself outside of the base, K? The blonde woman answered with unhidden sarcasm, but in the end, it was a mix between worried and deadly serious. My Patreon if you want to give me money and have chapters 1 have finished in advance. Patreon.com/user?$60424165. 20. Sumong. It has been 2 weeks and a half since Liam saw the aircraft. There wasn't any human that came or anything human-made he saw during those. Not for lack of trying, but at least he had a rough idea of where one human settlement might be from and the direction the aircraft was moving. The fact they took a young great Austrapede didn't bother him. He wasn't going to play the moral high ground in that aspect, and he didn't know why it was taken in the first place, but even if the naive part of him wanted it to be because it was injured or something, he knew better. It wasn't the case. It was sad and needlessly cruel, but it was life. The luckiest, more adaptable, smartest, and strongest in whatever category needed to have more chances of survival. Something quite clear to him. And the humans themselves, if they truly became aware of him, which would happen, unless he hid in a hole for all his life, which he wouldn't and couldn't do unless he was ready to forsake everything and live for how long he has a caveman. The dissecting table for him was the most likely end if he messed up. It was very delicate and very, very unpleasant to think about. Depending on how interesting he was, which he was plenty, to say he was the most interesting thing that has ever happened to humanity wouldn't be far from the exact truth. He had a wealth of knowledge, his biology, and his unknown origin. One of the three would be enough to put a target on his back, but the three at the same time. It's a matter of time before some part of his obvious uniqueness is known, such as that no human should be here breathing the air of Pandora like this for the most noticeable. It will cause the utmost interest of a spacefaring civilization between its members over who possess him, be it alive or dead. It was a terrifying prospect and quite possibly an inevitable objective of those as of yet only hypothetical but very plausible threat. At least that's what he thought, but generally being pessimistic with the higher-ups of humanity tended to prove more often than not to be the absolute truth, as cynical as it sounds. Particularly when money is involved. Even more so considering the movie, one of the people in charge decided to commit genocide on the native, not that it is uncommon in human history, which is a worrying fact in itself. And unlike the movies, he wasn't certain if the Nausicaa had plot armor or if the humans were incompetent to the extreme. And he didn't count on it for his future survival. The only good thing was that for a spacefaring civilization on the technological aspect they didn't seem that advanced if the primitive aircraft he saw was their average and what he remembered from the movie. Yet, primitive or not, he wasn't rocket or orbital bombardment proof as is. The future promises to be interesting. Sighing with these thoughts about potential Liam connected to Sept-10, the juvenile Tetrapteron was resting on his head. The three other Tetrapterons were currently flying around Gladius, who was playfully trying to catch them. The 4 Tetrapterons started to fly after barely a week and a half of them hatching. The lack of feathers that needed to grow was the main factor for their early flight, plus their natural biology, accompanied by a healthy and adapted diet, and their link to Liam resulted in them growing fast. He didn't want perfect little pets that acted cute after all. Not that there wasn't some of that as companionship was needed, but he didn't risk his life and killed multiple wild Tetrapterons and caused so much damage for simple pets that serve no purpose besides being pretty on his shoulder pads or parrot what he says. There were tools in a certain sense, as any other description of them will be unsuitable, no disposable ones. He was investing in them and was attached to them as one would to their pets. They are far from being risk-free to get either, but that didn't change the underlying reason for him having hatched them. Gladius in that aspect was different as it was unplanned, but regardless, he treated the 4 Tetrapteron just like their murder chicken elder. He fed them the best kind of foods, food adapted to his knowledge toward their best development and need. This wasn't the only thing he did, training in all forms was just as important. Nothing hard or dangerous for them, because as if a toddler can become crippled because of excessive exercise, so would the 5 of his young tames. This was for later when they are older. Which also comes with armor, mostly for Gladius, but some bit and piece here and could be down for Orion, Mary, Sept-10, and Oxygen. Most of what was done was mentals, be it in enrichment with contraptions made of simple mechanisms and puzzles that forced them to use their brains. Of course, of all that was mostly on Gladius, it was the oldest and most developed. The others were too young to truly understand, but they were plenty of progress. Honestly, the absolute trust they had in him plus the link made it simple to train them, a link that was shared between them two from various experiences and memory dip. However, it only told the general location and moods, which was still a very big advantage, giving inherent coordination between everyone. That brought the idea he was the heart and brain of some sort of mini hive mind, and that was slightly strange to consider if a bit of putting. Particularly with the knowledge of what element can potentially become in some of its forms, and that his implant fused with his very flesh ran on that element by means he wasn't sure, but the forefront hypothesis was that it used its growing capabilities in some shape or form with his biology to keep everything working. This aside, the future possibility of this small flock was high. Beyond scouting, they could for example be used as bombarders, making specialized explosives and teaching them how to use them as possible. Eyes dilated and closed, Liam focused on the link and with what he learned got glimpses of Septon's recent memories of its little hunt. The four could fly for at least half an hour straight and quite fast at that, which would only increase in the future. The feeling, even if bastardized and not real, of flying was difficult to describe aside from a sense of freedom. It was an exceptional feeling, but it wasn't his. Memories are fallible and inexact most of the time. The brain filters the important of the useless parts constantly, and they are susceptible to change from the owner's perspective to Liam's own too. It wasn't a computer he was connected to, but a being of flesh and naturally carbon-reinforced bone. Not only that, but they were from another species that saw and felt the world completely differently than he did. Liam was aware of this, and every piece of information he gained was taken with a grain of salt. That didn't mean they weren't clear, just that they can be potentially misleading in theory. Here what he was seeing was a Gnosix carving something on a viper wolf skull. The Gnosix was a young male, and next to him was a dire horse sipping the nectar of a flower. There was a basket on each side of the six-legged horse, of which bones, a bow, and a battle staff were poking out. Fucking finally. That was you, the bone carver. And likely one who tried to open the gateway, I suppose. Heh. Interesting. I hope he isn't as xenophobic as the one I disposed of, Liam thought, taking a deep breath as the physical link was gently broken and a piece of meat was given to Septon, who caught happily at the free treat. Since his four birds could fly, he made them scout during night and day, all having a shift to rest, play, and eat, even if the latter more often than not happened while scouting. He gathered information not only on the topography and movement of the fauna, but also on the Gnosix group, even if technically speaking they are also part of the fauna. They were few and far in between. The ones he saw with his own eyes were from very far away, and in a group of at least 50, a small clan he guessed. The others were during the night through the eyes of his tetrapterons, and these ones moved at minimum in groups of 2. He used Orion to track the small clan, and he found an area that safely led to the underground, the sacred hollow unknown to him. It wasn't that far from him compared to the area he mined sulfur. It was however hidden by dense vegetation within the entanglement of roots from a very old-looking lightning rod tree, and currently where the small clan rested. Yet he needed to learn, got more acclimated with the native to not get shot on sight, and what better option than a curious and lone Gnosix. And even with his tames he needed someone to talk to in a civilized manner to keep his sanity in check. He could actually build a radio with what he had and try to communicate with humans, but that was simply too dangerous to do so. And there was a high chance it wouldn't work either way, as he doubted there were humans close enough for his DIY radio signals to be captured, or other unforeseen circumstances stopping the signal, such as the unobtainium/pandorium. And so the next few days were focused on tracking the bone carver. Now that he had a real sighting, all came down to predicting the Gnosix movement, which was fairly easy when you have a starting point, the air advantage, and know your target general interest. When Liam found the Gnosix again, he sent a message in the form of a piece of white paper fiber with an extremely detailed drawing of the entrance to his base. The Gnosix's reaction to Mary flying above him and dropping a small cylinder of wood containing the drawing on top of his head was hilarious. This wasn't Liam's intention, but the young bird's own machination. Apparently they shared this same animosity with anything non-him. The outrage of the Gnosix having himself be attacked by a young tetrapteron, then the surprise at the clearly handmade object, followed by puzzlement as he fumbled around trying to find what it did until he uncorked it by mistake and saw the paper, which was followed by shock, fear, and then curiosity. The bone carver after that started to move toward his base, as Liam intended. It was better this way than him scaring or causing the Na-6 to react aggressively by him randomly popping up. This led to the present situation, the Na-6 atop his dire horse, his left hand millimeter away from grabbing his battle staff behind him as he gazed warily and with the utmost shock at the sky person walking confidently out of the giant door. A human, one without those strange metal bows without string that kill, strange devices on their face, those same close yet made of plant and animal hide, and with no other humans or metal birds close in the sky. Far from any of their settlements and all alone. It was sad in a way. The Na-6 didn't even know this place was built by sky people. The first time he thought it was an area abandoned by an unknown group of Na-6, the sound of Gladius's scream having made him think that it had become the nest of a great ostripede and that he awakened one of its young. Also why he ran as fast as he could at the time. The most dangerous aspect of great ostripede besides everything else was their sheer aggressiveness, something multiplied when with their young. The shock of the Na-6 only grew and with it came fear as from the same door a great ostripede came out, a young one only a head taller than the human but it was growling and glaring at him. Then he noticed 4 tetrapterons flying around until a green one landed delicately onto the man's right shoulder. Fear that vanished to be replaced by great confusion and befuddlement as the young great ostripede aggression dissipated when the human scratched the back of its head. The small glare from the human at the 5 of them and amused smirk didn't come unnoticed and puzzled the Na-6 further. Welcome to my humble dwelling. I'm Liam Cram, a human from a very faraway place. I steered you here as I simply want to learn about the people. Liam's voice and his body language were friendly. At least Liam hoped it was perceived as such by the Na-6. The point wasn't exactly to be understood in words but in intention, a thing that will prove to be unneeded. There was a pending silence, the Na-6 processing what he was seeing, such as the young great ostripede demanding even more head scratch, the way the tetrapteron on the human shoulder seemed jealous, and the 3 others that landed at the top of the gate and then his rough understanding of what the human just said. Then his eyes widened as he remembered the words of the Tsahik from this small wandering clan a dozen days ago. It still didn't explain what he was seeing and the sheer impossibility of it, but now he had an idea. The Na-6 decided to trust his intuition. There was a lot to gain and little to lose. An opportunity like this wasn't going to present itself again. Maybe he will even be able to help his clan from the harassment of sky people wanting to steal what they prided themselves in. Dismounting his dire horse, leaving his battle staff and bow on the horseback who refused to follow him, staying rooted in place, its instinct stopping from approaching a certain bladed bird. But no matter, it was a human even if he was the supposed lost child, his attention was mostly on the great ostripede. He only stopped advancing when the big bird started to growl at him. Which was immediately calmed down by a simple glance from the human to his surprise yet again. I salute you lost child Liam Cram, I'm Itsumong Irwixium te Raditswap of the Anurai let it be. No, those aren't the words. I accept, if what you want is learn, I can do, but trade it will be. For request of your I request learning equally about your own people. The now named Tsumong spoke calmly in broken English, with a very heavy alien accent, to the shock of Liam. And so a deal was sealed. My Patreon if you want to give me money and have chapters 1 have finished in advance. Patreon.com/user?u=60424165